All right, at 6 p.m., this meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School Board is called to order. I know that we have some Mauna Loma students here tonight. If you all would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, you're welcome to come up. You can come up here to the front, and then our flag is right here behind the trustees. Thank you to the Mauna Loma students for leading us in the pledge. We will now take a roll call of the trustees.
Bill Lambert.
Laura Berman. Laura Blakely.
Devin Conley. Let the record reflect that 4 trustees are present. Trustees Lambert, Berman, Blakely, and Conley, and Trustee Chang is absent tonight. We'll now move on to item C, the approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? If you're a member of the public and you would like to address the board regarding the agenda, you may raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or you can approach the podium and submit a yellow speaker card in person. Seeing as there are no comments at this time, is there a motion from trustees?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On a motion made by Trustee Blakely and seconded by Trustee Berman, the agenda was approved unanimously. We are now ready for item 2, the school showcase. Tonight we have Mauna Loma Elementary School here with Principal Lee.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to present about Mauna Loma and share what makes us so much love our community of learners and our community of educators just on the other side of Ringsdorf. So I actually have with me 5 of our student council student leaders who will be in the spirit of Love of Reading Week, which will be taking place next week. They will be conducting a read aloud to you all in the audience. So if I could have our 5 leaders come on up. And I'm not sure if the PDF will work. Okay, so for the audience at home, you'll be able to follow along. And this is a book that was actually written by our students. And it was published by our student council who reviewed it, gave some feedback, made some adjustments. And again, it's presented by our five of our student council students. Asher, raise your hand, Asher. We have Lizzie behind me. We have Sophia, Laz, and Bella.
Play. At Mauna Loma, we love playing in our classroom during exploration time. There are so many things to do, like puzzles, the art center, Legos, in the kitchen. When we go outside to play on the playground, we can play with our friends in Route 4. We love running, sliding, riding on tricycles, bouncing balls, and using the toys. Miss Liser's TK students.
Creativity. At Mauna Loma, we use creativity to transform mistakes or oops into beautiful things. A stain can become a frog, a bent corner can become a penguin's beak, and a torn page can become an alligator's mouth. Responsibility. At Mauna Loma, we take care of each other and welcome new students. We work hard every day. We do our best, even when it's not easy. We take care of our materials, our garden, and our campus. Ms. Fox, kindergarten students.
Courage. At Mount Temple. I think it's kindness. Last, no, it's courage. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's the village? Yes. Kindness. At Montaloma, we show kindness by filling each other's buckets. We use kind words to make drawings for each other and check on our classmates when they were upset or hurt. We show kindness by making sure everyone feels included. Be a bucket filler, not a bucket dipper. Mrs. Gazawi's kinder students. Green spaces. At Montaloma, we all enjoy and are thankful for our beautiful outdoor green spaces. We breathe fresh air. Our outdoor spaces allow us to play, and it is a space to learn PE. The soccer field allows us to practice our soccer skills and gives us an open, safe space to play. We use the garden for living classroom lessons where we can taste the food that we grow ourselves. Our gardens make our schools so beautiful. It gives us food and we can watch our plants grow month to month. Our garden gives us energy. Spending time in it is calming when we are frustrated and need to center our breathing and our minds.
Respect and mindfulness. At Montaloma, we respect ourselves and others by being mindful of our actions. We use kind words and listen intently when others speak. We are mindful of our voice, love what and encourage others to be heard. We think about how our words might make others feel. Montaloma students work hard to follow directions and expectations set by our school adults. We show respect and treat others fairly even if they are different from ourselves. Compassion. At Montaloma, we show compassion when we help others. For example, when someone falls, we can help them get back up. When someone slips and gets hurt, we can give them a band-aid. A band-aid. After after a storm, we can move sticks out of the way on the playground to prevent others from getting cold. Last, when we see someone using unkind words when frustrated, we can step in and help.
Hard work. At Montaloma, we show our hard workers in many different ways. First, we stay quiet when the teacher is talking. Next, we focus on our work. Last, if we have a question, we raise our hands. This leads second grade students. At Montaloma, we respect our playmates and peers by practicing good sportsmanship behavior. We take turns encourage and cheering each other on. Our games are inclusive and we encourage and everyone to jump in right in after we explain the rules, of course. We so we solve our conflictions with rock, paper, scissors and know that at the end of the day the score will always be fun to fun instead of 3-1. Mr. Aries, third grade students. Courage. At Montaloma, we stand up for what is right. We say no bullying and use our voices to express how we feel. We have the courage to be ourselves because we are all unique. Diversity. At Montaloma, we are a diverse learning community. We play with people from different countries who speak different languages, who have different beliefs, different who are different sizes, and who identify as LGBTQ+. Diversity at Montaloma is one of our superpowers, and it is a great thing because kids of different cultures and perspectives can meet and share cultures and perspectives with each other. We are a community that sees each and every Montaloma leopard for the human that we are. Ms. Fletcher Perry's fourth grade students.
Military. At Montaloma, we are located near the Montford Field Base. Many of our Montaloma families are military families. The military means family, responsibility, compassion, hard work, and diligence. Our military family students shared their lived experience from all across the United States and around the world. They are a wonderful and important part of our community. Miss Rice is fourth grade students. Innovation. At Montaloma, we come up with creative ways to solve problems. We research to learn. We build our design, and if it does not succeed when we test, we redesign and try again. We think outside the box and stretch our thinking by collaborating as a team. This helps us develop new ideas and find interesting solutions and results to real world problems. Montaloma engineers.
Empathy. Montaloma, we create a welcome environment where students feel safe expressing their feelings. Teachers bring into classroom discussions the importance of empathy by discussing different feelings and emotions. As teachers, we activate model empathy by listening to how students are feeling without judgment. We provide support and encouragement for students to be the best version of themselves. Inclusiveness. At Montaloma, everyone is included. Teachers create a safe environment where every child feels welcome and accepted. At Montaloma, we offer specialized academic instruction in classes for students with disabilities. Montaloma is an exclusive campus.
If these walls could talk, they would tell stories of all the hard work they have seen us do over all the years. They would say they feel beautiful because they display artwork and evidence of everything we have learned. Miss Rich's fourth grade students. If these walls could talk, they would tell stories of how they they have seen us grow and have witnessed all the wondrous stages we've gone throughout Montaloma. They have seen students working, struggling, and when they have had those aha moments. They have seen a lot they have seen a lot of people collaborating, having fun, and listening and learning from each other. During our morning meetings, they have seen our work stapled to them, showing off our work and they have witnessed fall festivals, walkathons, and so many other events that have made our year special. Miss Stacy's fifth grade students. If these walls could talk, they would share wonderful. Oh, if these walls could talk, they would share wonderful memories of how amazing our school is.
Thank you so much. And on the back, we've printed books, these books for each of you as a gift and thank you. We're a month late because last month was School Board Trustee Appreciation Month. So we were signed up for February though. So we have a copy for each of you. But before we hand those out, we would like to read the Montaloma Creed. Why don't you all
I am a Montaloma leopard, a leopard to my core. I am an important part of my school. I will work hard and respect others. I will be responsible and show compassion. I will have courage. I will not miss this day because this day will not come again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Montaloma Leopards. I know that for all of the trustees, having our school showcases and getting to hear from students is a highlight. And we'll put one for Mr. Chang right here. We'll get it to him. Thank you so much. So we really appreciate your coming out. I know it's raining and it's dinner time and there's homework to be done, but thank you for taking the time to join us. I loved hearing about your inclusive community and how all of the children at your school are welcome and loved and appreciated and supported. That's something that we really care about in our school district. And thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Are there any comments from trustees?
I'm impressed with your reading skills too. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening. Okay, consent. All right, we will now move on to the consent agenda, which is item 3. Are there any comments or questions from trustees? Okay. If you are a member of the public and you'd like to comment on the consent agenda, you may do so by raising your hand in Zoom, pressing *9 on your phone, or approaching the podium and submitting a yellow speaker card. I have 2 comments. Dr. Rudolph, I have a question about kind of point of order. Usually, the consent agenda is one item and all of the items under it are grouped together unless a trustee specifically pulls an item. So even though these are for 2 different consent agenda items, it's one speaker. Should I treat that as one speaker or as 2 separate speakers in terms of time allocation?
So technically, it's a comment on the consent item, and so it would be one item. It's not, because consent, all these items are treated as one action item unless somebody pulls it off, and then you would be able to comment on each item individually. You can, it's up to you if you want to allow multiple comments, but
Yeah, and my understanding is members of the public are not able to pull items from the consent agenda, only trustees.
correct. So they are allowed to make comments about anything that falls within the consent item.
Okay, okay.
But that doesn't, just because they comment on multiple items doesn't mean that they get, because it's one action item altogether, because it's considered as routine, is improved within one motion. And what you're allowing under the Brown Act is someone to respond to any item that you're taking action on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. So we have former trustee Nelson. I'm going to allocate 3 minutes. Trustee Nelson is going to address the board regarding D, the transportation plan, and F, the 24-hour access, both under the consent agenda. You may begin when you are ready.
If I didn't send the 24-hour access stuff, I'll send that in. And I assume that when a trustee pulls an item, it therefore becomes a separate actionable item. And therefore, I would get 3 minutes if a trustee pulled an item, right? So right now, that's where we're going to live on that. The transportation plan. One of the things about the transportation plan, I've sent you something where I was rather upset that you guys are still not providing transportation for poor kids, families who transfer to schools such as Stevenson. What you're saying, you passed a board policy that no, you're not going to do that. And there's one trustee who seemed to think it's going to cost $10,000 per student to do that transportation, yet your own advisors said it isn't. Well, here's the academic reason for doing this. This matched what the whole reason for doing the lottery was. This is from the November results from the Common Core. What it shows is on the left, and you could look at this with a much more complicated version in your board materials. What it shows on the left is what the math Common Core meeting standard was throughout the district. That's a district average for SED kids. And on the right is what the SED average for the SED kids who are at Stevenson. It's like a factor of 2.7. And then the last year it was done, it's a factor of 2.9 higher at Stevenson for the same SED category group of students. So one of the things that the superintendent mentioned is when you do these things for trying to bring equity and bringing desegregation of schools like Stevenson that are highly economically segregated, it has a result on the kids that are brought into that school who are poor kids, because they get to have, instead of there being 3/4 of their kids in their class being from families that are poor and don't have educational resources a lot of times. In this case of Stevenson, almost every student who's there, who's SED, is in an entire classroom where the kids have extra capabilities because their parents are usually higher educated besides being wealthier. So by increasing that number of SED students to 31% at Stevenson, there's a whole bunch of SED kids that you're.
Thank you, former trustee Nelson. As always, please feel free to submit written comments to the board as well if there are things you weren't able to touch on in your time. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda from trustees?
Sorry, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On a motion made by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Berman, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. We will now move on to item 4, communications. Are there any members of employee organizations who would like to address the board at this time? If so, you can raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or approach the podium. Seeing as there are none at this time, are there any representatives of district committees who would like to address the board at this time? You can also raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And seeing as there are none, we will move on to the, oh, yes.
Sorry, I'm just
Oh, go
wondering,
ahead.
the Reimagining Castro Committee,
Yes.
is this a good time to share that information? Yeah, okay. So the Reimagining Castro Committee spent a couple of days last week visiting 2 schools in Newark, New Jersey. We went to, did I put it the school names? North Star Academy, Fairmount Elementary, and North Star Academy, Lincoln Elementary. These were 2 school sites. As we learn about best practices in schools that have been outstanding at serving students of color and low-income families. So it was a really terrific opportunity to visit another school site, to learn about the culture, the routines, the systems that they've put in place. They are definitely achieving great things at their school sites. We had an opportunity to meet with the principals of the 2 schools and the deans of students and learn so much about, they let us visit all of the classrooms. We were welcome in any part of the school. So it was a great learning experience for the committee. So I just want to thank everyone that's serving on the committee for taking the time during that winter break to make that trip and to come together and also take time to process all of the information that we heard so we can surface things that we think would be really impactful here for our district and our students at Castro. And trustee Blakely, was there anything else that I may have missed?
No, we are also visiting more schools next week in San Diego, and comparing the practices. They're different, what we thought might work at our school, why we thought they got their results. And so we'll have a larger sampling to evaluate at that point.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. We will now move on to the superintendent's updates.
Yep, just a couple of things. You actually took one of those items from me, so I really appreciate that. But I do want to commend both of the negotiating teams. We continue to resolve different issues. I think we settled on 2 or 3 more TAs just this week. And again, the tone and tenor has been great. Both teams are working really hard to sort of understand and sort of compromise in terms of positions. So it's really good to see both of the negotiating teams working in unison. And hopefully we should have everything wrapped up within the next month or so. That's what my fingers crossed for. And just want to thank all of the school sites for all the work for Black History Month. And then I've already seen some of them putting out news notices for what they plan on doing for Women's History Month, which starts tomorrow. So super excited about that. I know that the board plans on passing a resolution, or hopefully we'll pass a resolution later on today, but just wanted to point that out. And then finally, just want to say there is no community check-in tomorrow, will occur after the next one. We do have a cafecito coming up mid-March, which will be in person again over at the Castro community. And then the final thing I just want to say is that we continue to see an increase in enrollment. We did notice that, and I'll put this in the weekly, that there was less interest in in-person events about choice schools. Doesn't mean that people weren't interested, it's just probably they have more information. But what we have noticed that is we are seeing an uptick in terms of the number of students who are returning, as well as an uptick in the number of new students that come into our district, which is really good. So we'll continue to monitor that. And then we're also noticing that our engagement on social media around enrollment has also been on the uptick too. So kudos to all the principals, the enrollment team, as well as to Ms. Victor for all the work that they're doing, as well as our comms team for putting out all the information.
Great, that's wonderful news. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. We will now move on to item 5, community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address, Mr. Nelson, if you can wait until your turn, we have about 5 people. Can you wait for that until your turn, please? Just because, thank you. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. To address the board, you can submit a yellow speaker card and approach the podium. You can raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. We usually allocate 10 minutes for public comment, and then depending on the number of speakers, we divide up the time amongst the speakers. So I'll wait to see how many speakers we have. So we have 1 speaker online and we have 5 speakers in person. I'm going to allocate 2 minutes per person this evening. We're going to start with Principal Taylor, who is online. So we'll get a timer up for you, Principal Taylor. Then we'll hear from Phoebe Holyvote, Sophia Tanasso, and Evelyn Peters, followed by Lola Murthy, then Raymond White, and then former trustee Steve Nelson. Mr. Taylor, you are welcome to begin when you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I've heard some comments at the last few board meetings that have been a little worrisome for me as a person of color who came from a background of low SES. My parents were considered SED. And I think when we talk about people, we want to try to preserve their humanity and who they are. And I think sometimes in an effort to be helpful, we sometimes infantilize people. And I think I just want to encourage our entire community, rather than talking about groups of people as if they have no agency, that they can't do things, that their poverty is their entire humanity, that we think about it more in a more humane way and less from a deficit model. it's hitting a little personal for me. And I think it also impacts our students in our communities who listen. That we're not talking about poor students as if they can't do anything for themselves, or poor families as if they have nothing to offer. There's wealth in intelligence in our students, in our families. There are goals and hopes and dreams. And I think that we want to make sure, as a community, that we continue to honor and maintain that dignity. That's it.
Thank you, Principal Taylor. All right, we will now move on to Phoebe Holyvote, Sophia Tanasso, and Evelyn Peters. Now, I know the three of you are together, so because you have 2 minutes each, we'll put up 6 minutes on the clock.
And Evelyn had to step out, but Phoebe and Sophie will be speaking.
Oh, okay, so we'll do 4. Thank you. 4. We'll get it fixed.
Hello, Dr. Rudolph and members of the school board. My name is Phoebe and I am in 3rd grade at Gabriela Mistral. My friends and I are here on behalf of our troop. We are Troop 60911 from Girl Scouts. We are students in many Mountain View schools. We are here today because we noticed a problem and we want to help. Some of us couldn't be here tonight, so we wrote a letter, and some of us also took a petition to our schools, which our troop leader will give to you. We noticed that there's dog waste on a lot of our school fields and sometimes playgrounds. Some kids step or fall on the poop, get their clothes dirty, might have to go home and skip some class. It also could make them upset or embarrassed.
My name is Sophie, and I'm in 3rd grade at AMI. We looked at the parks and only saw one dog waste station. We hope we can fix this with you before spring comes and dogs come to the parks for walks. We hope we can donate some money so that you can buy signs and more stations at each playground. Thank you for your time and for looking at this problem with us.
Thank you very much for your comments, ladies. Thank you. All right, our next public comment is from Lola Murthy, who will have 2 minutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Lola and I'm in 3rd grade at Landos Elementary School. Today I want to talk about something really important, our school lunches. Did you know that what we eat can help the planet? Eating more plant-based foods can make a big difference. It's like giving the earth a giant hug. When we eat plants instead of meat, we use less resources that pollute the air we breathe, and we save land for animals and plants to live on. Plus, eating healthy plants can keep us strong and happy. I talked to my friends and lots of us like eating vegetarian, but sometimes there's not enough vegetarian food at lunch. That's not fair. We shouldn't eat animals if we love them. So I think we should have more veggie options every day. Maybe we could even have special days with only plant-based food. Because we live in Silicon Valley, the center of innovation, we can be an example for the rest of the world to follow. I feel very strongly about animals and plants, and I believe you, as the school board, have the power to make this change and change Lambeau school lunches. I feel very passionate about this topic, and I very strongly hope you change our school lunches to only vegetarian and make sure they never ever run out. I believe we can make this change and make Earth a better place. We only have one Earth, so we should all take care of it. I know we can do it if everyone works together to help our planet Earth. Let's make our school lunches super animal and plant friendly. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murthy. And I will also say the board also loves to read written comments too. So if you have written copies of what you said tonight or more comments that you don't have time to share, feel free to email them to trustees@mvwsd.org. Our next speaker is Raymond White. Mr. White, you may approach the podium and you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Did you vote to shorten the time to 2 minutes? Or is that just arbitrary? The chair can decide that. I wanted to remind you of what I said in a letter to you a couple of weeks ago. You posted the monthly topics, and I think you have, at least I've gotten them. Are those posted so that the students and the faculty, not the faculty, the parents can look at them, the spreadsheet, and see the topics and the lesson plans? I'm curious about that. Anyway, March 12th is Detransition Awareness Day. I don't see that listed. It might be useful. Looking at the two topics in April and May, they are about speaking out when that's useful, like I'm doing now, which might not be useful, but I try. The people that are mentioned are uniformly from the left. That goes on into May when advocacy is the topic. And I would like to stretch that or suggest stretching that to people who are less on one side and more in the middle, at least, though there are plenty of people farther on the right that could be mentioned. Solzhenitsyn, Sharansky, Navalny, people who have spoken out at great cost to themselves.
Thank you, Mr. White. We have also received your written comments, but I'm sorry, you're out of time. We have also received your written comments, but if you have further comments beyond your written comments, you may submit them to the board. Mr. Nelson, former trustee Nelson, it is now your turn. You may begin when you are ready.
Yes, this is about middle school math. Middle school math is one of those gateways into high school math, which is one of those gateways for people like me and the gentleman on your right there, or my right, who had STEM careers, careers that depend on math and technology and science. That chart I've shown on the left there, your left, is showing the efficacy of if you get poor students. There's, poor family students. They're not poor students. If you get them into an environment where they're surrounded by people who are doing at grade level or better, anytime they have a pair share or a four-group work group, they have a chance to work with other students who probably know the right answer, and it helps them think about things. If you put them surrounded by people who understand no more than they do or less than they do, and they're doing below grade level, it hurts their math. And when it gets to the end of middle school, that shows up as this kind of effect. We know in our community that most of the socioeconomic disadvantaged are in the Hispanic group. It's not 100%, but the majority of either one. If you don't know what those percentages are, you should figure them out or ask your superintendent. What percent of SED are Hispanic and what percent of Hispanic are SED? But you can see there's a large ratio between, at the end of education here, how well meeting standard is between Hispanics and Asians and whites. It's 80 and the 80% for Asians and whites, and it's like 23% for Hispanic. This is your responsibility, your programs, your public policy.
Thank you very much, former trustee Nelson. We will now move on to item 6, review and discussion. We'll start with the early literacy update with a presentation from our Director of Early Literacy, Cindy Nguyen.
Hi. Let me get my presentation up.
Perfect. So thank you for allowing some time tonight to share an update on what we've been doing with early literacy. So our work is aligned to goal area number 1 in our strategic plan, making sure that we have effective and consistent instructional practices that meet the needs of all of our students. And so as a reminder, I should share this part at our last update a few months ago. Our district has created an early literacy team. We're focusing on early literacy because our data shows that we had 67% of our second graders who were reading at grade level at the end of last year. And that transition from second to third grade is really crucial because the shift in emphasis goes from learning to read to reading to learn. So we want to make sure that we get all of our kids to that milestone. We also have an opportunity to align our instruction across the district to evidence-based instruction and the science of reading. And so we formed an early literacy team, and our early literacy team supports in several ways. One way is that we support foundational reading skill development through reading intervention, professional development, and family education and engagement. We also support the shift to structured literacy across the district and the science of reading through collaboration with principal and coach teams and professional development for our leaders and our teachers. And so as a reminder, when we're talking about the science of reading, what we're talking about is a really rich evidence and research base that is multidisciplinary from lots of different fields. It's research about how our brains learn how to read, why some people have difficulty learning how to read, and the type of instruction that works the best for the most students. And I shared this visual before too, but this rope, Scarborough's rope, is an anchor for the science of reading. And what it really shows is that skilled reading or reading comprehension is the outcome of lots of different components of reading. And so when we think about building a skilled reader, we are teaching all of these parts of reading. We're thinking about supporting kids who are not yet proficient at reading. We need to go back in the rope and see which part of the rope is weaker so that we can strengthen that part. And so when we do professional development with our leaders and our teachers, we talk about all parts of the rope and the importance of all of them woven together. And then when we're focusing in on our reading intervention, we're really focused on the word recognition part of Scarborough's rope. And so an update on our reading intervention part, that work to date. So as I had shared before, our approach to reading intervention is we provide data-driven tiered support. We follow our district's universal data cycle calendar, and the groupings are flexible with each cycle based on data. And the data that we use is iReady, the iReady dyslexia screeners, and other early literacy assessments. And our reading intervention teachers use systematic evidence-based multimodal instruction. They are all trained in Orton Gillingham to provide their reading intervention. And so I'm going to share some data from the first few cycles of reading intervention. So this is from the iReady winter diagnostic assessment. And like I said, we're focused in on certain parts of reading. So we're really focused in on phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words. So we pulled out those domains of reading in iReady. And what we're really looking for in reading intervention is we want to decrease the percentage of students in tier 3. And so this is an aggregate of all of the reading intervention students across the 4 school sites. And there's some really cool highlights when we look at this. So we can see that in phonological awareness, that's the ability to hear and manipulate sounds. We see a decrease in tier 3 in second grade of 25%. When we look at phonics, phonics is the connection between letters and sounds to letters. We see a 25% decrease in tier 3 for our first grade students. And then high frequency words, that's the ability to decode words with lots of automaticity and speed. We see a 23% decrease in tier 3 in our first graders. And so overall for iReady reading, although these foundational skills are part of that score, there's also comprehension in there, but we also see lots of decreases in tier 3 as well. Like in first grade, 30% decrease in students in tier 3. And so this chart here shows kind of a snapshot of the students that we are supporting in reading intervention. So the first row shows the number of students at these 4 sites that were flagged for reading difficulty in the winter dyslexia screener. And then the second row shows the number of students that we are currently supporting in reading intervention with the reading intervention teacher. And then the third row shows the percentage of students who are receiving reading intervention from the reading intervention teacher. It's important to note here that our students who need reading intervention support receive reading intervention from the reading intervention teacher, and some receive from the classroom teacher because there's a reading intervention block for the entire class during that time. The next row shows the number of students we were able to exit from reading intervention, and then it shows a profile of the demographics of our students in reading intervention. And then so now we can look at the data disaggregated by the different school sites. So the same components, the phonological awareness, the phonics, the high frequency words, and then kind of the overall score. So a highlight at Castro is that we saw a large decline in tier 3 for second graders in both phonological awareness and high frequency words. And then this is a snapshot, the same data, but just for the students at Castro School. This shows the data for our students at Mistral. Again, we see some declines in tier 3 for our first graders in phonics and high frequency words. And then here's a snapshot of our Mistral students. So this shows the progress of our students at Mauna Loma. And so at Mauna Loma, we saw lots of decline in tier 3 across the domains, but we also saw students move into tier 1 across the domains too. And I'll talk about what that means in a later slide, or what it means for the students. And so here's a snapshot of our students at Mauna Loma. And so here is the data for Therakoff. And at Therakoff, we also saw some pretty significant declines in tier 3 across the domains and some increases in tier 1 across the domains as well. And then the snapshot of our Therakoff kids. So this slide shows some of those highlights that I had shared before, that we were able to reduce the number of students in tier 3 across domains, but we also saw double-digit increases in some of the areas in tier 1 as well. So like across the 4 school sites in phonological awareness, we had an increase in tier 1 of 28% of students. And then in first grade high frequency words, an increase of 22%, and in second grade high frequency words, an increase in 25%. Another thing, we were able to exit 50 kids across the cycles. We're in cycle 3 right now. When we exit the students, for some of the students, they exited because they were at or near proficiency. So when we looked at that Mauna Loma data, there are a lot of kids that we were able to exit because they were at or near proficiency in phonological awareness and phonics. And so we replaced them with other students. For some of our students, they weren't quite yet at grade level. However, when we did additional data, because we're data responsive, we saw that there were students in that grade level that had additional needs based on the dyslexia screener or other early literacy assessments. And so those students moved into the reading intervention group. And some of our reading intervention students went back to the classroom to do intervention with their classroom teacher. Because of this movement, exiting some students from reading intervention, we're actually able to consolidate some of our groups at Mauna Loma. So we had fewer groups, and that way we redeployed the staff to support some additional groups at Castro. And then we had additional space in our schedule to support a small number of 3rd and 4th grade students as well. And so in addition to providing direct intervention service to our students at the 4 early literacy sites, we also have some other projects we've been working on. And so a big part is providing professional development for our leaders and our staff. And so for our leaders, our site administrators and our instructional coaches, we've started with them to do professional development on the science of reading and the instructional shifts. And then after we finished those sessions, then we moved into a trainer models. So then we worked more closely with the instructional coaches so they can really internalize the content. And then we're collaborating with them, and the site team of the coach and the principal are providing the Science of Reading PD for the teachers in the spring. And so far, each elementary teacher has received at least one of the 3 sessions, and by the end of the year, they'll receive all 3 of those sessions. And we're doing this professional development now in the spring in preparation for the new ELA elementary curriculum adoption in the fall. And so that way our teachers have the theoretical background knowledge about the science of reading now. So when they receive the curriculum in the fall, they're ready to just get started with it and understand why the components are the way that they are. And then so the professional development for teachers, like I was talking about, the coaches and the principals are providing training for elementary schools about the science of reading, 3 sessions by the end of the year. We also did additional professional development with our early literacy sites with the primary grade teachers about foundational reading skills so that we can be in better alignment for first teaching and reading intervention. And that's led to some really great collaboration between the early literacy team and the classroom teachers. And a lot of classroom teachers have been coming to observe reading intervention as well, so they can bring some of those practices into their classroom. In addition to that, we've offered some after-school professional development for teachers who really want to just get started now with some instructional shifts based on the science of reading. And so it's been open to every teacher in the district, really targeted to elementary school, but we've also had middle school RTI teachers attend, and actually some librarians and instructional assistants as well, because we're really excited to learn this. We didn't know how many people to expect. So the first session, we had about 20 teachers, but our last session, we had over 35 teachers and IAs and librarians. So it was really cool to see how, people in our district are really excited to do whatever it takes to learn and grow to support our kids. We've also done some PD with some teachers at the middle school and work with our pre-K TK team as well. Another component or another project we've been working on is some family education and engagement. So we tried out a program this year at Therakoth Family Reading Club, and the Family Reading Club meets once a month, and it's the families of our 1st and 2nd grade reading intervention students. So at every monthly meeting, we start out with some community building, and then some reading intervention teachers and I practice an at-home activity with the families, so the parents and the kids together to support literacy. So some of them have been about how to use these readers that we have and how to read with your kid, practice reading. Some others have been about the importance of working memory, and then so we've taught families some different games they can play to support working memory, how to practice high frequency words, the different sounds in the English language, and shared some videos so that we can practice articulating those sounds and the importance of fluency. And so we do that activity, we model it first, and the parents do it with their kids in the room so that we can coach them as they do it. And then at the end, the kids received a gift-wrapped set of books that are at their reading level. They're all decodable readers, and those readers have a little QR code that the families and the kids scan so that they can practice that articulation, that target sound in those books. And so we've had 15 families who attend regularly. Sometimes we have more families than that, but there's a core group of 15 who come, and it's been really great to get to know them, and they feel really empowered and have some tools that they can use with their kids at home. And so some considerations as we think about our early literacy work. So for the reading intervention side, reading intervention is really meant to fill gaps so that students can more fully access the general education curriculum. The success of reading intervention is not in isolation. It's really contingent on the strength of core first teaching. So the slides that we had shown earlier is not a product just of reading intervention. It's a product of reading intervention plus what's happening in the classroom. Our reading intervention program is really focused on one strand of reading, the word recognition part, not the whole process. And so really we're trying to fill that gap for our kids so that we can send them back to the classroom, and so they're really ready to learn all the parts of reading. For the professional development side, our focus this year has really been about supporting teachers and leaders with the transition to the science of reading so that we will be ready to implement the new curriculum when we get it in the fall. We've offered additional PD to support at the early literacy sites, and as I was talking about, the after-school optional PD for people who are ready to just get going now. And so the next steps, we're going to continue progress monitoring and providing reading intervention at our early literacy sites. We're going to continue supporting the shift to the science of reading and evidence-based practices through ongoing professional development and site collaboration. We'll continue to collaborate with the pre-K, TK, and the K-5 ELA Adoption Committee to plan for a successful transition as we implement the new curriculum. We're going to provide input on early literacy to the Reimagining Castro project, and we will provide another update on our work at the June board meeting. So I just wanted to, as I close out, say thank you to the board for providing the resources to have a focus on early literacy. Because it's really, if you haven't on your site visits stopped into the reading intervention rooms, it's really endearing and inspiring actually to see how much the kids have grown from the beginning of the year to this year. So thank you again for the time to share today. And if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nguyen. Are there questions from trustees? Trustee Berman?
So I was just wondering if the data that you showed for all of those schools, for each of the school sites, and I apologize if I missed this, is this data that's specific for the students that are working on intervention, or is it all of kindergarten, all of first grade for the entire school?
Yeah, we just pulled out the students who have received reading intervention at any point in this school year.
Oh, got it. And my second question is, I'm wondering for students, there's some students that were red flags for dyslexia, and then other students that just had these gaps to fill. And I'm wondering if both sets of students receive the same sort of practices and lessons, or if there's something different that is used for our students that are flagged for dyslexia.
Yeah, so for all of our students, we are using that multimodal approach to reading. And so they are in groups together, and the concepts the kids are working on are based on the data that we have for the kids. So all of the kids, we do additional assessment to pinpoint the areas of need.
Thank you.
Trustee Blakely?
Thank you. I think this is a sort of a follow-up on the question that Trustee Berman asked. By the way, thank you for the presentation. You had those grids for each school, said number of students flagged for reading winter dyslexia screening, number of students receiving reading intervention from our RI teacher. And then the next line was % of students receiving RI from RI teacher. And I was wondering, is that just these students that are receiving the early intervention, or is that the overall percentage of students in each grade?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit confusing, right? So we have a reading intervention block, and our reading intervention teachers are part of the whole team. So the grade level teachers are also part of that reading intervention block, and all kids are receiving some type of targeted instruction, right? And so when the percentage of kids exceeds, I guess, what the reading intervention teacher can take in their group, then the classroom teacher is also providing intervention. And so these percentages are the percentage of students who are working directly with an early literacy reading intervention teacher. There are other students who are also working with their classroom teacher on reading intervention.
Got it. So it's the percentage overall of kids that are just, they're all getting reading intervention, but this slide is the percentage of kids that are working with a specialist as opposed to the classroom teacher. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
My other question really is just, it sounds like we're still working on an approach for next year. I know we're trying to get ready for the new adoption, but do we have plans to expand this program to all of the schools? It sounds like we're already offering some PD for those that are interested, and you're already starting a little bit with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at certain sites. But do we have a plan yet, or is that still in progress for next year?
Yeah, so I think we're in the process of collecting data and seeing what's working and what's not working, and then figuring out what this all looks like for next school year.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm optimistic.
I'd also like to thank you for the presentation. I know we're all very excited about this work because we understand that the outcomes for students who are able to read on grade level by 3rd grade increase significantly. I did have a question about our students who are flagged for dyslexia. Some of them may in fact have dyslexia. Are we continuing in monitoring their progress, or are we watching for those students who may actually qualify for further services as well?
Yeah, so the great thing for reading intervention is we're providing an intervention for kids, research-based interventions for all students, particularly students who have reading difficulties. And we do a lot of progress monitoring. The reading intervention teachers check in with the classroom teachers at least once a month formally through collaboration. And that way we're still monitoring the kids. And then for kids who continue to have difficulties, then it can go through the cost process to further see if there's other needs and avenues for supports for the kids.
And the cost process might include things like looking at further assessments for IEPs or things like that.
That would be after we go through the cost process. The next is the SST and then what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I had another question with the parent education opportunity. I'm really excited about that. Have you all looked at or thought about, just as we kind of train teachers to be the trainers for each other, or coaches to be trainers for teachers, parents training other parents? This is something I've seen at some of the schools I've worked at that's been very effective.
That is a really cool idea. That's not something that we had considered, but it could be something to consider now.
It's kind of amazing to see parents training each other because it's this peer-to-peer engagement, and they really do have the skills and the drive to want to serve their students that way. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to public comment. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to comment on this item, you can raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or you can approach the podium and submit a yellow speaker card. We do not appear to have any public comment at this time. Are there further comments from trustees? Trustee Berman.
I just want to share how promising that data looks. Just want to celebrate that for a moment and thank all of our reading interventionists for their hard work. I'm also glad to see that when there's a little bit of space to serve the 3rd and 4th graders, that they're being served as well. And even our middle school teachers are getting involved, because we know that this is something that even our middle school students can benefit from. So I'm just really feeling appreciative that we're able to provide this intervention for our students, and the support for the parents is really terrific as well.
I'm also very excited about this, and I'd love to see, as we move forward, is it possible to keep track of the students who have gone through the reading intervention program and look at their long-term outcomes? So as they move, maybe there's a kindergartner who's exited, but can we follow them over the next few years and see what their outcomes are having gone through this program? And then I also want to note that, the hardest group to kind of move out of tier 3 are students in 2nd grade who may be multiple years behind. So making progress, moving students out of tier 3, which is more than 1 year below grade level, is very challenging. And I'm glad to see that we've made some movement on that. I hope we can get as many of those kids up to grade level as possible by the end of 2nd grade. All right, on that note, we'll move on to item B, the parcel tax polling results, with a presentation from our superintendent, Dr. Rudolph, and our chief business officer, Dr. Westover.
Good evening, trustees. We actually have a few people here to help us talk through some of this. So this is in preparation for potentially going out for a parcel tax. We have Jeremy Hauser with us this evening. Jeremy, did you want to introduce yourself and then and Lucia?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Westover. And thank you all for having us. Jeremy Hauser, a founding partner with Team Civics. We presented to you all a few months ago about exploring the renewal of your expiring parcel tax. Since we last spoke, we've worked with FM3 Research and Lucia Del Pupo to conduct that research and begin to test the feasibility of a measure that A, renews your expiring parcel tax, and B, actually converts it to a square footage based tax with a cap on the rate that any one parcel can pay. So with that, we'd like to spend some time tonight to walk through those numbers. I'm going to kick it to Lucia to do that. And then I'll come back at the end to talk about, our interpretation of the results and our recommended next steps. So with that, I will give it to Lucia.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through some of the key findings of the research that we completed. So one moment, it looks like it's loading. Wonderful. So quickly, before I jump into some of the more interesting parts in the findings, I'll cover our survey methodology. So we spoke to over 500 voters in the Mountain View Wisman School District. These were likely November 2024 voters, so representative of that likely electorate. The margin of error on the data is 4.2%. And we used a dual mode approach. Essentially what that means is the survey was available online and via phone, and voters were invited to participate via phone call to landline and wireless phones, as well as email invitations and text invitations to the online survey. So getting into the actual findings, we asked voters about a series of public institutions, public organizations relevant to the measure and their favorability of each. We asked about local elementary middle schools, teachers, the school district, and the school board. We saw that broad majorities have favorable opinions of local schools and local teachers. A majority has a favorable opinion of the school district. And then when it comes to the school board, they have a net favorable opinion, but a lot of voters are unable to offer an opinion. Nearly half actually said they'd never heard of or couldn't rate the school board. And this is not kind of an uncommon finding when it comes to asking about school boards. We asked voters whether they felt like the school district was doing an excellent job, a good job, only fair job, or poor job. A majority said the district is doing an excellent or good job. About 23% said it was only fair or poor, and then 24% were unable to offer an opinion. We also asked about the district's financial management. Here we saw that voters were pretty evenly divided. 27% said it was excellent or good, 17% said only fair, 12% said poor, so kind of split between that excellent or good and only fair rating. But really, the largest number, 44%, were unable to offer an evaluation on the district's financial management. And we also asked about the perception of need for funding, whether they felt like local schools were in need of a great need, more money, some need, a little need, or no real need. While a majority said there was at least some need, not very many felt there was a great need. So there was not a lot of urgency behind this need for funding. So getting into the actual ballot measures. So we tested two versions of the measure. What we did is we split the sample into two demographically comparable halves. And we asked one half of voters heard one version equivalent to 11 cents per square foot with a $7,500 parcel cap, generating a $5.5 million. The other half of the sample heard about a 15-cent measure capped at $1,750, generating approximately $5.5 million, just a little bit less than the 11-cent version. What we saw was that support for the 11-cent version fell below 2/3, is at 62%, whereas support for the 15-cent version was right at that 2/3 margin. It's also worth noting that the definite yes on the 15-cent version was much stronger. Support was much more certain there with 39% compared to 28%. We also asked a follow-up question about renewing a flat parcel tax at the $315 level. And we saw that their support dropped to 60%. So a renewal was not as appealing to voters as the square footage approach to the parcel tax. We then asked voters about a series of elements of the measure. So this included individual projects and provisions that could be part of the measure. We asked voters to tell us if each of these were extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not too important to them. And you'll see them here ranked over the next few slides by the percentage who said they were extremely or very important. At the very top of the list is maintaining the high quality of education in local schools. 87% said this was at least very important, with 54% saying it was extremely important. And just kind of up there with it was attracting and retaining qualified teachers. 57% saw this as extremely important, and 86% said it was extremely or very important. Also, a top priority was offering competitive compensation so the best teachers can continue to live and work in this high cost of living area, with 82% saying this was very important. Providing academic support at every elementary school for those who have difficulty with the basics was very important to 81% of voters. Ensuring schools are meeting children's essential social, emotional, and academic needs was very important to 75% of voters. And just under 3/4 said providing academic support for at-risk children, including foster youth and those experiencing homelessness, and providing retention incentives to keep best teachers here in Mountain View was very important. As we continue down the list, we see items that were around 2/3 in importance, maybe a little bit less intensity, less of that extremely important, but still high priorities to voters. And those include things like offering programs focused on 21st century skills, ensuring the funds stay local, providing training and support for teachers so they can access the latest information, methods, and technology, maintaining the district's outstanding programs in music and art, maintaining small class sizes, providing academic support for English language learners, and preventing overcrowding. As we continue down the list here, we see again some items that, for the most part, majority said were important, but we're starting to see that dark blue bar of extreme importance go down further and just overall kind of less of an overall priority, whether it's maintaining up-to-date textbooks, closing gaps in academic achievement, providing before and after school programs, requiring independent audits, increasing the number of counselors, and preparing schools for the state mandated introduction of TK. I will say, again, all of these are important to voters. You have a majority of voters saying they're important. It's just that the other fundamental items of providing a high quality education and retaining, attracting quality teachers and competitive compensation, those were the ones that elicited the greatest reaction. At the bottom of the slide, 40% said increasing energy efficiency in schools. This is the only item that fewer than half saw as extremely or very important. So, throughout the survey, we asked voters how they would vote on the measure 3 times. We asked initially very early in the survey to kind of get a clean read on their reaction to the ballot language without any information, because the ballot language is the one piece of information we know every voter will have. We then provided a series of public positive statements emulating or imitating a public positive campaign. And then we did a series of criticisms, things that could come up in the community, things that they might hear from their friends and neighbors. For the 11-cent version, we saw that support peaked at 67% after those positive educational statements and then dropped to 62% after criticisms. Remembering that this is a measure that requires 2/3 for success on the ballot, so it's only at 2/3 after those positive statements. The 15-cent version remains above 2/3 throughout the survey. It starts at 67%, moves up to 73%, and then back down to 68% after the criticisms. I will say, because this is a half sample, the margin of error here is roughly 7 points. So even after positives, we're just within that margin of error of that threshold for passage. The 2/3 level is enormously challenging, but it does seem like the 15-cent version with the lower cap is better positioned to face that challenge than the 11-cent version. So the next couple slides cover some of those kind of public education themes that really resonated with folks. At the very top, consistent with voters' priorities of retaining teachers and providing competitive compensation, we saw that 51% said a message about the high cost of living and the need to retain teachers was very convincing. 48% found a message about ensuring that large corporations pay more than single-family homeowners and ensuring that large property owners are paying more. And then the 44% found a message on property values and the investment in schools and the benefit it brings to property values as very convincing. I should say that the message that in our industry are considered kind of very convincing, very effective, are ones where 40% or more tell you that they are very convincing. So we have kind of 3 messages here, 3 statements that meet and exceed that threshold. Just below it is a message focused on all the wonderful things that the school district has done and achieved. And then also 35% saying the fact that there's new state mandates requiring the district to provide TK, and this measure is going to ensure that the district is prepared for that. So 35% found that very convincing. As we continue down the list, we see messages that, again, about a third or less said were very convincing. So this was the idea that Mountain View students who are at risk, whether it's because they have English language learners or they're foster youth or experiencing homelessness, this measure will ensure that they have the resources they need to access a bright future. The potential for budget cuts, ensuring that students continue to have excellent student achievement, investing in students' mental health, the measure's accountability, and the fact that this measure may even create some savings for some folks, and larger property owners will be paying a bit more. All of these were generally convincing, as we'll see in a moment on the next slide, but they didn't have that same intensity and impact as those ones that I just highlighted a moment ago. So as you'll see here, we layered on the percentage who said these messages were very or somewhat convincing. And you can see a majority found all of these messages very convincing. But those three at the top that both were the most very convincing are also among the most overall convincing. So those focused again on the high cost of living, making it difficult for teachers to make ends meet, the fairness aspect with large property owners and businesses, and then the benefit to property values. Those were kind of the top three messages. So I'll quickly wrap up here, but the main takeaways essentially is that the proposed 15-cent rate does appear viable at this time. The 11-cent rate does not really appear to be a viable path because it only reaches 2/3 support after positive messaging. And regardless, frankly, that with the 15-cent measure, there is a clear path to success, but it will require a strong program of public education just because support is so close to the 2/3. And that mainly, frankly, is because the 2/3 threshold is very challenging. It is a very high threshold. We do see that voters in the district have a positive view of the district, its performance, and overall favorability. But the perception of need for funding is not urgent. It's not very intense. So that's kind of an opportunity to kind of provide that and close that gap and increase that awareness of that urgency of need. And as well, as I've mentioned, voters really place a high degree of priority in your district on providing a high quality education, retaining and attracting teachers, and compensating them appropriately. And that was kind of a consistent theme throughout the survey. So with that, I'll pass it to Jeremy to talk a little bit about some timeline.
Thank you, Lucia. And I just want to underscore the recommendation that this data is showing us that 15-cent per square foot rate with a cap of around $1,200 seems to be the more viable path forward. And we are recommending that based on these results, that we continue the next steps in the process towards potentially placing a measure on a future ballot. Now, I wanted to remind you all of the 4 key milestones in a successful ballot measure that we discussed the last time we were all together. You'll see them up on the screen here. The 3 milestones in blue can and should be funded by the district. And that final milestone in yellow, the independent campaign, as you all know, must be privately fundraised and coordinated. No district resources can be used in that effort. But as you can see, we've now completed the critical first step, our feasibility study. We've done a lot of research to see not only what is possible in terms of a square footage parcel tax, but what funding priorities, positive messages, and other components are important to voters. And I think we should take that data and information to proceed into the following 2 steps. What that looks like for us is moving into this second phase, which is awareness building, where we take the findings from that research and begin to craft a public education and outreach effort to get the information to your community to help them understand why you're considering a measure to renew and increase your parcel tax. As I mentioned, you cannot use district resources to advocate for a measure, but you can provide impartial information about your funding needs and how a parcel tax renewal might address those needs. So in that phase, we would help you get that message out in the community through informational mailers and digital advertising. We'd help you develop a list of internal and external stakeholders so that you can begin to do a more one-on-one and targeted roadshow in the community. And we like to think of those stakeholders in those 2 different buckets because your internal audiences, like your parents and teachers and other bargaining units probably have a pretty good sense of your budget, and so a different message is needed for them. And your external audiences, think other electeds in the area, other business groups, community groups, probably don't know the ins and outs of the budget, but nonetheless will want to hear from you as you're embarking on a path forward to potentially placing a measure on the ballot. And really in that awareness building phase, we're recommending that you provide information to your community, but that you also provide a feedback mechanism so that you can hear from them, right? And we can do that in a broad-based way through direct mail pieces that actually solicit feedback through a tear-off reply card that voters and community members can send back to you. We can repurpose that same survey and have it available online, but also through those one-on-one stakeholder meetings, so you can have a candid back and forth discussion with your community as you're considering placing a measure on the ballot. And when you're doing that, what we're really trying to do is understand at a more nuanced level if your community is ready for a parcel tax renewal measure. And we can use the feedback we receive in that outreach process to refine the proposal that we're putting on the ballot. I think about the specifics of the cap on the overall limit in particular as something that we could stress test out in the community and with property owners who might be affected by that cap. After we felt like we've adequately built awareness, we move into this third phase, the actual development of the measure itself, where we take the findings of the voter opinion research as well as key anecdotes and pieces of feedback that we received in that outreach process and actually build the measure itself, right? As a board, you all wanting to adopt a resolution calling an election 88 days before the election we are targeting. For example, November of this year, that deadline is August 9th, and we think we should march forward towards that deadline. You will have to adopt a resolution that contains the various components you see here on the screen. That key 75-word ballot question, the underlying tax rate, which again, we're recommending a cents per square foot model, the cap that any one parcel can pay, and various accountability provisions built into that measure so that you can adopt it and deliver it to the county registrar of voters again before that 88-day deadline. Shortly thereafter, there will be a process of submitting ballot arguments in favor of the measure. Those ballot arguments also come along with 5 signers. At that point, there's a bit of a passing of the baton. Again, the district cannot be involved in the campaign, so there will need to be an independent group that forms to do the grassroots organizing, fundraising, door knocking, et cetera, to get this measure over the finish line and to that 2/3 threshold. And then on the next slide, just to look at it from a high level timeline, just kind of what the next few months would look like if we were targeting a November election. We would be using February, and thankfully it's a leap day, so we still have one day here in February to work on the messaging development and outreach planning, and that work has been happening in the background currently, with the goal of starting to roll out that public education and outreach effort in March, April, and May. Again, as I mentioned, that could include direct mail and digital advertising to all residents. Again, not advocating for a particular outcome, but providing information about your funding needs and how a parcel tax renewal could address those, and engaging in those one-on-one stakeholder meetings and listening sessions so that you can get good, candid feedback from folks who maybe didn't have a chance to take the poll a few months back. That would really gear us towards the development of the measure itself in the early summer. We would be targeting a board adoption likely in early June, where we would come back to you with a final proposal, including, again, that ballot question, final tax rate and structure, and all of the details necessary to qualify for the ballot, again, with that August 9th deadline. I would like to hold out the possibility of potentially doing a shorter tracking survey to check in with the electorate before you make this decision. It's obviously a big decision to make as a board, and we want the most up-to-date data. I would say that as we are embarking on the outreach process, if we're hearing feedback that might make us feel the need to go back and poll voters, I think it would be a wise decision to do so before you ultimately voted and acted as a board to place a measure on the ballot. And then again, that would leave September, October, and November for that independent advocacy campaign to really take the reins and get this measure over the finish line. Again, district resources cannot be used, although both board members and district staff can be involved in campaigns on their own personal time, should they feel inclined to do so. With that, I think either Lucia or I are happy to answer any questions you might have about the numbers or next steps.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there questions from trustees? Trustee Lambert.
Yes, I have some few questions. So let me just focus on one first. On the slide number 9, ballot measure language tested. You go to that. So what you're presenting in your questionnaire are sort of two options. And what I'm seeing is it's sort of a sliding scale. The amount of the rate per building area square foot and the cap. With the objective here is to get this target of approximately $5.5 million. Why did you decide on these two amounts, and what would happen if you sort of change the building square foot area, let's say increased it and increase the cap?
So
suggestions are that that's, you know, you're telling us you're getting a statistically significant difference in your polling of these two. And yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm happy to explain the rationale for how we landed at those two numbers. I'll start with the 11 cents per square foot. For the average single family homeowner in your community, 11 cents per square foot would pencil out to $191, which is the current flat rate of your parcel tax. So we wanted to use that as an anchor. And we wanted to test an alternative option that generated the same amount of revenue roughly, but did so with a different structure, so that the only components that were different between these two measures, right, were the underlying rate and the cap, because we wanted to learn from this research which of those numbers is more important to voters. And I think the results are interesting because all of you that can do math on the fly can probably realize that the 15 cents per square foot rate is actually a higher rate for a single family homeowner and a lower burden for larger commercial property owners. Our analysis of these numbers is that legally, what we have to include in a 75-word ballot question for a square footage parcel tax is complicated, right? Those last few lines there include a lot of numbers and a lot of conditions. And we think we're seeing numbers that are higher for that 15 cents per square foot model because the cap itself is lower. And although not a single family homeowner will actually qualify for that cap, they are hearing that $1,700 number and they can't do the math on the fly. And so they are thinking that it might apply to them, which again, this is just our best guess in looking at the data. But when we compare that $1,750 to the $7,500 cap, it's a significant difference. And I think we see the numbers bear that out. I don't know if Lucia, if you have anything else to add to that, but that's kind of my read of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that that's completely on track. I think that's what people are reacting to, because either way, 11 cents or 15 cents sounds pretty small. And so I think they're reacting to the cap rather than doing the math of how it would pencil out. I will say I did want to address the comment about the statistical significant difference between the two. So I will say the two are within the margin of error of each other in terms of it's a 7-point margin of error. So they're only 5-point difference. But I think what kind of fuels our sense that that 15-cent version is stronger is that it's consistent throughout the survey. It's consistently above the 11-cent version, and also the definite yes version in the two versions. It's 10 points or 11 points stronger for that 15 cents. So the 28% definite yes is quite soft in that scenario.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So what would happen if you increase, let's say, sake of argument, to 20 cents building area per square foot and decrease the cap? in your experience with these?
I think in order for you to take full advantage of the square footage based model, you need a cap that is large enough that is going to collect the additional revenue from your larger properties. So if you go too low on your cap, you're frankly not taking full advantage of this type of tax structure because you're limiting the amount of revenue you can take in from larger property owners. So it really is a balancing act. And I think to me, these numbers just are so obvious that public education is needed because it is confusing, right? And we're asking voters to make a big switch here in terms of how they're funding their schools. I think it's going to take time to explain that to the community. But in our experience, the more you limit the cap, the more you're shifting the burden back to single family homeowners rather than spreading it more equitably across various different property types.
And the opposite way, if you increase the cap too much, then you feel you're overburdening the commercial.
That's exactly correct.
So this is fascinating. I have a question as well. So when you presented negative messaging to the people participating in the survey, I'm curious if you presented what the cost would be for single-family homeowners as part of that negative messaging, that with the 15 cents, their actual bill would go up, and with the 11 cents, their bill would stay the same. I know you split who was being presented with each one, so it's not like you could present the 11 cent, the 15% people, or 15 cents people, but for the 15 cents, was that discussed at all? Because I can imagine the League of Women Voters publishing information about what this would actually cost people. I can imagine ballot statements that outline, hey, like this is actually going to raise your rates, even though it's designed to look like it's getting more from commercial properties. So was that part of the testing?
We did not test the specific costs, but we did test extensively messages on cost of living being really high and saying we can't afford to add hundreds of dollars in taxes. We had a separate message saying that local and state taxes are going up everywhere. Enough is enough. We can't afford more taxes. We had a message calling out the cost of living adjustment. So we tackled the cost issue. We also talked about the impact to businesses. So we didn't use specific numbers, but we talked about it in concept quite extensively in the critical statements to kind of capture that any opposition or negativity that's out there.
And I would add that we did test, probably you said it in a way a lot more kinder than an opponent might say it, but essentially this concept that a square footage based model is deceptive, right? So don't be fooled. The district is trying to be deceptive with your tax rate. You're actually going to see a significant increase. And so that was one of the negative messages as well. So you saw those numbers that Lucia presented where for the 11-cent rate, it dropped us below 2/3, but not for the 15.
Yeah, I think what's killing me here is that I would far rather make sure that single-family homeowners don't have to pay significantly more, but that we're actually bringing in the amount that should be coming in from commercial property owners. And I'd like to be transparent about it.
Yep.
And it just kills me that that fails at the ballot. Trustee
Yeah.
Blake.
Jeremy, do you have something else to say?
No, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I had some questions around the same. I mean, the very first parcel tax measure I ever worked on failed because there was no cap. It was a per square foot, and the Tri-County Apartment Owners Association tanked it. And then there was a second one, which they supported, but it wasn't a very high amount. And I still have PTSD, even though that was almost 20 years ago, about having that fail. We had to lay off all the school librarians. We had like 2 janitors for the whole district. The teachers had to clean their own rooms. I mean, times really were tough, and we really needed that money. And larger businesses tanked it. But, in fairness, that one didn't have a cap. And I think some of the parcels were paying like over $10,000. And so I'm glad that we can do a per square foot one now, but I'm also very glad that there is an element of a cap, because I think it would not be very productive for us to do a measure that the business community comes out against. I think they just have so much more resources than we do that it wouldn't succeed. So whether we've got exactly the right numbers here, I don't know, but I'm glad that it's possible to do that, because at the end of the day, I want the measure to be successful, and I want our school district to have the resources that it brings in for all the reasons that we've been discussing. But so that wasn't a question, I guess that was an opinion. Sorry. So one thing you said was that the $315 renewal tax was less appealing. Well, our tax right now is only $191. And I know when we first approved the one that's about to expire, we were really pushing for like $225. But it just didn't get the same numbers. And so we went with the safe bet, which is $191. The $315 how much would that bring in if we did a $315 flat tax?
Lucia, I think you can pull up the slide, but I believe it is the same. It's that $5.4, $5.5 million range, which is why we chose it, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Just another couple of questions. Why did we ask about energy efficiency, since that's a bond thing, not a parcel tax thing? Just curious.
I think we, in the project section, tested a series of, we cast the net pretty wide when we think about the way the money could be spent. And with parcel tax, there's a lot of flexibility. So we kind of wanted to kind of touch on some different topic areas. And that was one that we knew is kind of a spending area, I think. And so we included it as kind of an item that it could be tested. And it clearly wasn't a priority for the parcel tax. So it was maybe not our best idea.
Okay, no, and just curious. And then my last question has to do with the timing of the board's approval of putting the measure on the ballot. You say that it has to be done by August 9th, and probably a few days before, because somebody's got to run it down to the county and whatever.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that we maybe put this on our agenda for our last meeting in June? And does that give the committee, the non-school district committee, a chance to start doing fundraising over the summer while we're working on the ballot measure, so we've got a little extra time, not just 88 days to campaign? Or what is the timing of those efforts?
So I will say that there is nothing that is stopping a concerned citizen who may or may not be listening into this presentation right now from opening a campaign committee tomorrow to support a future ballot measure, right? We work in many districts. In fact, I think of your neighbors in Los Altos who have had their campaign committee open for more than 25 years as an ongoing recurring thing. So the delineation line is really for the district more so than it is for an independent campaign group. So I would say whether or not you adopted a measure as a board in June or August wouldn't hamper the campaign's ability to at least start organizing. Again, it's hard to campaign for a measure that doesn't yet exist, but the groundwork can certainly be laid ahead of time.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Lambert.
Another question. This goes down to the questions or the elements that you polled for. So I'm sure you have experience. These are standard questions that you ask the public. Is there anything we're missing? Right? We're so here at the margin of sort of acceptability. Is there something else in your experience that that really resonates with certain school districts that you've polled and things like that?
I would say I don't think we missed anything. It was a really extensive survey and we got a lot of data back. There is a component that we did include that is not required, which is the cost of living adjustment, which If you weren't looking for it in the 75-word question, you might have missed it, but there were 3 key words: annual inflation adjustments, which would mean essentially that we could build into the measure an automatic increase into this measure on a year-by-year basis. That is not required, and is oftentimes a really close consideration for districts who are on the threshold. Every district like to have a COLA built in, of course. Sometimes when you're right at that 2/3 level, it's something to consider taking off the table and looking at in a future renewal. So that's the one thing that comes to mind to me. It's not that we didn't test it, it's that we did, and it's something that we could actually tinker in the measure as we're kind of doing the outreach over the next few months.
Just where I'm going with this in general, and I don't have an answer, is that, trying to think of, every school district's unique, every community's unique, every point in time is different. Try to identify what those differences are and then try to, figure out really what the right message is for this place and time.
Yeah. I will say that we spent a considerable amount of time with Dr. Rudolph and Dr. Westover on the front end, essentially interviewing them for all of the good, positive messaging and success stories within the district so that we tailored the messages specifically to you. So I will say that there was a lot of work done on the front end. Now we take those messages and make them broad enough so that they're understandable to the average likely voter, but that work was certainly done on the front end to make sure that we were, tailoring this research to your community.
Yeah, and just my thinking there is that it's not only making things broad, but then making things specific enough so they're meaningful for individual voters.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, go ahead, Lucia.
No, I just was going to say, I agree with everything Jeremy said. And, we definitely, while the question structures are often standard, we did definitely kind of tailor it to your district. And I think one of the things that would be a next step if the district decided to proceed would be to kind of revisit that 75-word ballot question, now knowing what we know about the things that stand out in your community, and kind of to reconstruct it. And some of those strongest testing items are in there and some of them are not. And so we would kind of want to revisit that going forward. Sorry, Jeremy.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I just have one other question. Do we have any sense why the TK support need pulled as low as it did? I thought that was very compelling, but it may be that people aren't familiar with what the needs are. I'm just curious if you have a sense of that.
I have not seen it test very strongly anywhere, unfortunately. Part of me wonders if awareness is quite low. And I also do a lot of work on early education, and unfortunately, broadly, voters prioritize early education below K-12. They haven't yet publicly kind of grasped the continuity and the importance of it. And so I think there's some of that also fueling the lower priority.
So that might be an area for education just in the background, or do we just focus on the top messaging?
I think it's definitely something that you would want to continue that conversation with your community. In the context of the measure, we would recommend focusing the conversation on the elements that are most important to voters in your community.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that when you look at the data and it's just the really short and sweet message about supporting TK, it's not very popular. But then when we spoke about it in a little bit more detail in the positive messaging section, it was a little bit more appealing to voters, right? Because we had the time to explain to them why this transition was happening and why it was becoming part of your education model. So I do think you're totally right that there's an opportunity for education there to kind of help connect the dots for voters who don't have kids in school, who aren't keeping tabs on the latest mandates and updates in education.
Thank you.
Well, and I think one of the challenges with TK is that basic aid districts are having to foot the bill themselves, and LCFF districts are getting state funding for the student ADA that they get through TK. So I think there's a big education component there as well. I had one more question. You mentioned some of the digital kind of awareness about the district, the digital advertising. It's already been going on, is that correct? Or not yet? just digital advertising, building the awareness of the district?
Yep, we've already started that, and we're almost done with the first round.
Okay, and I have heard from some constituents who saw some ads on YouTube TV. I'm assuming I also heard from, I reached out to some colleagues in Los Altos, and the Los Altos School District used YouTube TV ads when they were building awareness for their recent parcel tax campaign. Is that something that's just part of our digital advertising now? It's new, and so I'm just curious about it.
We haven't, none of our outreach has been focused on the parcel tax. It's all been just focused on talking about the schools, and so it ties into the reputation campaign that we sort of embarked upon. We have actually two. There's another one that'll start up at the start of the school year. We did speak with Woodbury today and brought up this precise issue. And we felt like if one will work with Team Civics to sort of highlight what the messaging is. And then if there are specific target groups, and speaking with Ryan, he was like, we can pull that out just by pulling the data and we can target them and use. So for instance, I think he said if we want to reach the sort of late 20s to mid 40s, he would recommend that you start doing Instagram advertisement instead of Facebook. So we can segment the advertising a little bit more once we're clear about what we're trying to do and doing it in an informational way, similar to what Jeremy's already highlighted.
Okay, and it's, my understanding, just so the public understands too, all of those mailers that you're getting in your mailboxes right now, for example, for the primary election, when you register to vote, your registration information is available in what's called the voter file that is kept by the county registrar of voters. And so campaigns and candidates can access that information through the county and use that to target different demographic groups for different types of advertising. They might be targeting, for example, likely voters, which is usually, let's say, voters who voted in the last 3 elections, including primaries. But it also means, if you see something come through on Instagram or YouTube TV, Mountain View Wisman is not broadcasting it to the entire United States of America. It is probably matching your IP address to your voter registration. And so it's very, very targeted in how it's going out and hopefully very efficient.
So in this case, I think, and Ms. Hausman can probably tell us a little bit more, I think it's actually just doing geocaching. Like it's just looking at where you are, sort of where your IP address is, but I would defer to her. I don't know if we were using the voter rolls in this case, but we would.
Oh, I see.
For the next one.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm happy to speak to that just for a second, just to clarify that all district funded communication cannot be targeted, right? We can't decide who to send this information to. So everything that we would send as a district would be sent to every registered voter and parent in the district. So we still could upload the full voter file, right, into Facebook and target one-to-one via IP address, but we couldn't do that slicing and dicing ahead of time because we're not, again, advocating, we're providing information. And so we can't slice folks out of the electorate because we think they might not be supportive. We've got to provide that information in an unbiased and impartial way to everybody.
Okay, so that's something that if there happens to be an independent campaign for the parcel tax that is not using district resources and not done by the district, that independent campaign might slice and dice the data a little bit more. But
correct.
Okay, that is a really helpful clarification. Thank you.
Yes, you can from a 30,000 foot view, you can use the same tools. What matters is the tenor and tone of the message and who you're sending the messaging to, right? But the tools themselves can be the same, whether you're running a campaign or doing a publicly funded education effort.
Right. So sorry, what I was trying to point out is like, if you're trying to reach a specific demographic, while you may not be targeting them, where they sort of exist in the digital footprint. So, TikTok is geared towards a younger group. Instagram is geared towards a older group, and then Facebook is is an even more different group, right? So like, but each one of these have a specific demographic who interacts with them, and so you know, for our standpoint, if we were trying to just get the word out to about TK, our target audience actually exists on Instagram, not on TikTok, and they may exist on Facebook, but they exist more on Instagram than they do on Facebook, right? And so they're interacting with Instagram a little bit more. And so that was the nuance I was trying to explain.
Thank you. Now I feel like I need to go spend more time on TikTok.
One more quick question. Assuming that the board does put the measure on the ballot and we have a campaign for this, and heaven forbid it fails in November, but our existing tax measure expires in June of 2025. When would we, if we decided we wanted to do a special tax, because we'd have to wait till the primary in 2026 to have the next regular ballot, right? We have to do a special election.
That's correct. You would need to call a special election in order to hit that.
How is that? Can you just pick, or are there certain times?
There are a lot of available options. The two most common that would be available to you after November of 2024 would be March of 2025 or May of 2025. The deadline to qualify for those, the March one would be December of this year. So pretty shortly thereafter, we had the results certified from a November measure, or if you were pursuing May, you'd be looking at an early February board adoption deadline.
And the district would have to pick up, or the campaign would have to pick up the entire cost of that, unless there were other special measures that were on that ballot that it would be divided among. Correct.
The district specifically would be paying the balloting costs. And to clarify, anytime a district puts a measure on a ballot, regardless of the ballot, there is a cost associated. The key difference, of course, is that when you target a November 2024 election where every other jurisdiction is also on the ballot, you are sharing those costs with a lot more jurisdictions, whereas a March or May in an off year, you'd likely be the only thing on the ballot, and thus all of those labor costs, printing costs, mailing costs, specifically for the ballots, would be funded by the district.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions from trustees, we'll move to public comment on this item. If you're a member of the public and you would like to comment, you may raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or in person, you may approach the podium and submit a yellow speaker card. We have one in-person speaker. We'll put a 3-minute timer up on the board. Former trustee Nelson, you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. The conclusion about 15% on 15 cents, unfortunately, it does conflate the 7,500 and the 1,700 cap. I'm glad to hear the surveyors talk about that, because that's what the math shows, and that's when you're doing experimental design. For instance, for semiconductor physics, you make sure you separate those in how you set up your experiment. The problem is then if you're just doing a certain number of experiments, cuts down your statistical uncertainty. But much larger studies, and I think I've sent you the name of the 2 professors who I've actually talked to in previous years about this per square foot kind of parcel tax. There's significant research. There's only about less than maybe half a dozen economics professors who study these kinds of taxes, because they're so peculiar to the state of California. But they show these results that this tax per square foot is much more likely to pass, particularly if you hit the residential people. And I would like to say that what I heard was saying this 11-cent one is one where you can give the explanation to the voters, or not you, somebody can, that it's made to match what the average is going to be. If I was going to run a campaign against this, I would say that the problem with the 15% and a low cap is it's more aggressive than 11%, 11 cent with a higher cap. The other thing, of course, as Trustee Blakely brought up, you really, somebody in the administration has to talk to the two gorillas, Google, Prometheus, and the Tri-Valley counties apartment people, because what killed the LA Unified District, it tried a 15%, a 15 cent per square foot improvement tax, and they lost it. And part of it, they weren't organized. The other thing, they probably didn't have a dollar cap on it because it wasn't clear what the law was. So you have to be very careful about those big ones. But 20 years ago, I think we had a $1,700 cap, and we had a stepped up one, which was trying to produce what this is doing. Now that we know we need a uniform rate that's legal, if you do it per square foot, we may even be able to get the Google headquarters, because land that's separate, buildings are separate than land.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Are there further comments from trustees? Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more online comment that I missed earlier. There is a delay in the YouTube video that's about 3 seconds, so I apologize for missing that hand. We will put 3 more minutes up on the timer. And speaker LM, you may unmute yourself when you are ready.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Leslie. I am a homeowner in the Montaloma neighborhood, and I listened to the presentation, and maybe I'm not understanding everything, but at 11 cents a square foot, I think in the presentation it said it was about the same dollar amount as what we're currently being taxed at $191. When I did that math at a 5,000 square foot lot, it came out to about $550, and most of the homes in my neighborhood are about 5,000 square feet. So when I looked at that 15 cents a square foot, I happen to be in the corner lot, and I have almost 12,000 square feet. So I'm right at that limit. That came out to about $1,800. So I'll save a little bit with the cap. But my next door neighbor is 5,000 square feet because she's not in the corner. So she's at 750, still quite a bit more than the $191 we have now. And I just kind of want to think about how that plays out. You're talking about caps. When you talk about feeling fair, knowing that I'm going to pay the same amount as Google doesn't feel super fair. But I do want to get the businesses to pay more. And I think that I don't know how big the square footage is of the majority of Mountain View, because I thought we were mostly about 5,000 square feet, but it does seem like a pretty big jump. So I just wanted to clarify that. I don't know if I got my math right, but I think I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rudolph, if I may ask a clarifying question, or Jeremy, the parcel tax isn't actually about the size of the land, it's about the size of the building. So the square footage is about the size of the building versus the size of the land.
That is correct. It is per building square foot. So if there is, for example, a 5,000 square foot lot with no buildings on it, it would be considered unimproved, and it would pay that $25 unimproved rate. And when I mentioned the 11 cents penciling out to $191 for the average single family home, that's because the average single family home in your district is 1,734 square feet. And again, that is the building itself, not the overall property.
Right. And for us, what we've calculated is that you don't really see a difference until you cross the 1,300 square foot threshold. So for instance, on my residence, I would drop down to 138 at 11 cents. And then for 15 cents, I pay $189.45. So once you hit 1,300, that's when you'll start to see the increases that are modest. And then obviously, I mean, if you have a 10,000 square foot home, that's when you'll get closer to the cap.
Yeah, I think what's confusing, well, it's interesting to be aware to what can be confusing for the public about this is that it's called a parcel tax. And yet the way we're proposing to implement the tax is by taxing the building and not the parcel itself. Trustee Blakely.
Just to clarify, because I know we've spent a lot of time with this, but not everybody has. The only parcels that would be taxed with the size of the part is the unimproved parcel. So the 1750 cap is for improvements, and that would only apply for improved parcels. So regardless of the size of the land, if you have improvements on it, that's what's going to be taxed, the number of square feet times the rate. And if it exceeds 1750, then 1750 would be the cap. So in the example that the caller provided, her lot would not be taxed based on the square footage of the lot, only on the square footage of the building.
Trustee Berman.
I'm just wondering if we can define improvement on a lot.
Right. So the easiest way to think about it, if there's a building on a lot, that's what's going to, it's the square foot of that. Not like when somebody's thinking of improvements, we naturally think of if I'm building an extra wing to my house or putting an extra room or something or expanding my garage, it is only the square feet that actually counts. So, and I think that would be, that's more for the independent campaign to sort of clarify that information. So this is good to know. So there's a great education piece that sort of exists. The only people who benefit from the cap are commercial properties or large residences, mainly apartment homes, not the residents. I don't think in our numbers, Lucia or Jeremy, that any house hits the cap at all in terms of the 1750. So you're only doing this to stave off the opposition from large landowners, corporations.
And if it's helpful, just with these two different measures we presented, the 11 cent with that higher cap, any building that was 68,181 square feet or larger would hit the cap. So pretty significant building size. For that 15 with the lower cap, it's any building over 11,667 square feet. So again, it's this interplay between the underlying rate and when that cap hits that can create a wide array, but still even in the higher underlying rate, lower cap, any building smaller than 11,000 square feet is not going to be hitting that full tax threshold.
Thank you very much. All right. On that note, thank you very much, Jeremy and Lucia, for the presentation this evening. It is obviously very interesting and there's a lot of detail to it. And we have much food for thought. And trustees, I think it's 8:03. It's a good time to take a bio break. So we will take a break until 8:10.
Thank you.
All right. At 8:11 p.m., we are ready to resume. We will be discussing item 6C, the Environmental Sustainability Plan Update. We will have a presentation from our Chief Business Officer, Dr. Westover.
Good evening, trustees. Tonight, I also have Jean Young with me, who will come up a couple of times during our presentation. It's really been enjoyable to work with this task force. We have a wide variety of individuals that are on it, teachers to specialists, doctorates in particular areas, and I think it's really been a great collaborative experience. And we are going to continue to meet until we bring this plan back to you in May for review and then eventually approval to prioritize items. This all started with a board resolution on January 26, 2023, that's guided actually all of the work that we've been doing. It also connects back to our strategic plan to make sure we have equitable distribution of resources that support student success. So the January 2023 resolution by the board refreshed our efforts. We'd already been doing many things that were sustainable, but we also have the opportunity to become a leader in this area. So we already recycle, compost, and have installed LED lighting and solar panels, but we can do much more than we're currently doing. And we want to make a plan to guide and consistently implement our efforts moving forward.
Hi, so, oops. Okay. So the Sustainability Action Plan, are we?
Hold on just a moment.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. So one of the things that, we've talked about with Allende and Rebecca is that considering the scale of the district is that one of maybe the aspirations for the district is to take an incremental approach based on the resources and available opportunities, is to continuous incremental improvements as opportunities arise. As we've kind of explored different areas of sustainability, we realize that there's a lot of different dimensions to it that could potentially be funded from a lot of different areas. So one area is facilities, utilities, and infrastructure. So that's capital projects, equipment, system upgrades, replacement. But then there's a whole area of operations, maintenance, repairs, equipment and system calibrations, student services, waste management. And then there's curriculum learning, increasing environmental literacy, integrating nature and the environment. So you've seen different aspects of that in your discussion. So Rebecca kind of touched on the schedule, where we are. We're heading towards sort of a May reporting back from the resolution that was approved early in last year. She talked a little bit about the committee, the task force that we've assembled. Really, the first part of the process, up till the end of 2023, we really wanted to honor people's participation, their interests and their passions. And so we really provided an opportunity for everyone who wanted to download and share with us their their expertise, their experience. And you can see on the screen here, all the different areas, the wide breadth of areas that we've covered. So from, legislative and funding initiatives to partnerships to behavioral change management, urban forests, stormwater management, water reclamation, child nutrition, et cetera. So this is just an example of what we've been just collectively just getting smarter and learning from each other. So as you may recall from an earlier presentation, we kind of have worked on the backs of what LA Unified School District did in terms of organizing their sustainability program into 6 focus areas. They include energy conservation, water stewardship, education and awareness, high-performing schools, campus ecology, and emerging technologies. And these are sort of umbrella terms that Dr. Westover will go into a little more detail with you over the next 15 or 20 slides.
So we tried to take everything that we had discussed in these meetings and put them into these 6 areas. And when we were speaking with the committee, what's hard about doing this is some of these topics don't fit nice and neatly into one. They actually go across several of them. So we've spent quite a bit of time, for example, talking about sustainable food, eating lower on the food chain, buying locally, and that really hits energy conservation, water stewardship, education awareness. It hits all of these different areas. So as we are trying to get them to fit in these 6 areas, we also understand that they can actually be moved around quite a bit. So this is where we think they might fit best. And of course, we're looking for board feedback if you think it really fits in a different area, but it's just the acknowledgement that it really can span multiple areas. So energy conservation. Some of the things that were discussed were reducing energy consumption, our HVAC systems, efficient lighting, smart operating systems like HVAC, lighting, irrigation, thermally efficient buildings, roofs, windows, and doors, increasing renewable energy use, solar systems, transition to an EV fleet, and increase awareness of energy conservation. And some of this, it was as simple as turning off a light and establishing school committees as part of that education towards the students. So some of the discussion highlights. So we meet for an hour over the lunch period, and some things that were really talked about were most sites have efficient lighting systems, but they're not operating correctly. So for example, during our last measure, we put in very efficient light fixtures, and as part of the code, we had to put in light switches, which you can probably see in this room, that have a monitor. If there's movement in the room, the light's on. If there's no movement, it turns off. But what we found is if there's even a little bit of movement, a paper blowing, the light switches on. So our light is on all night. We go off, we turn it off, and then it turns back on because it senses some movement in the room. So that's an area for improvement. We try to be sustainable, and what was spec'd is not working as intended. So calibrate lighting systems and integrate management systems similar to HVAC. So all of our HVAC system is on Johnson Control. Get our older DO portables on the HVAC management system and have the school site committees drive conservation. If kids know that I'm doing something good for the environment, they get involved. Water conservation, reducing water consumption, having high efficiency, low flow plumbing fixtures, higher efficiency, smart irrigation systems, native drought resistant landscaping that we don't need to irrigate, reducing groundwater pollution and replenish underground aquifers, low impact development, site measures, on-site water retention, so bioswales, rain gardens, pervious surfaces. And then what we additionally, water reuse and recycling opportunities for local water recycling and reuse systems, controlled areas and learning opportunities for students. We talked a little bit about MOT wash stations for our buses, large scale recycling reuse systems, and I'll touch a little bit on this next, are not really feasible for school districts. Even if we were to collect all of our water, we would need to treat it and keep it safe for students. So there's actually no schools in California which have a large scale water treatment as part of their plan. But that doesn't mean that we can't use some of these ideas as part of education for students to collect rain barrels, for example, and have the kids use those rain barrels to water their native gardens. And then increase awareness around water stewardships using school site committees. So highlights from our discussions was a strong interest in water reclamation. And then what I just touched on was that water treatment really, we looked into it. We had our construction manager reach out to several architects to talk about the feasibility of treating our own water. But that's really not something that happens in school districts. But school sites can definitely do smaller projects. We also talked about that the city of Mountain View doesn't currently have citywide municipal purple pipe. However, our committee brought up that it is available north of the 101. So if we end up building a school out that area, that could be for future use that we tap into the purple pipe, which is water for irrigation. Opportunity for MOT to implement a closed loop recycling reuse system to wash our buses. And then for future projects, we should plan to increase pervious surfaces. In the area of high performance schools, really looking to design leading green building criteria like LEEDs and CHIPS, optimize indoor and outdoor learning environments, lighting, thermal, acoustic, and increase environmental literacy through high performing school environments. And then the idea is that we take these and apply the best design practices to our capital projects as they come along. One thing that we had talked about additionally is applying the best management practices on campuses. Integrate stormwater management systems, implement smart irrigation systems, reduce the heat island effect, which we're doing partially in process right now with Carducci, creating outdoor landscapes, learning environments, installing native drought-resistant landscaping, and encouraging alternative travel modes to schools. So walk, bike, and roll, and reduce waste and plastic pollution. Highlights from the committee was reducing waste by educating students. A lot of these items are easy levers for us to pull. So by creating opportunities for the kids to self-sort their waste streams and having the 3 bins available on all the sites, have a place to share food that they do not consume, which is actually already in progress, and provide students with healthy food options and educate them on healthy food impacts to themselves and the environment. Other highlights is utilizing native plants on our school sites, the need to train maintenance staff on caring for plants. This actually came up several times. So as we improve our environment, making sure that our staff is trained and know how to upkeep the things that we put in. And then needing to shift a mindset from tidy ornamental landscapes to native plants that I think, was it Canopy or Living Classroom that said at times of the year they do look dead because they're hibernating. And also having that mind shift set in our community that the plants are hibernating, that they're not dead, but we're not going to cut them back right now. And providing guidelines for future schools to evolve with new technologies and standards. Looking at campus ecology, the greening index, greening metric, which we've spent a couple of board meetings on, green scores for all campuses, greening opportunities, and greening plans. And I won't go into these into detail because we've been talking about them quite a bit. So some of our highlights that we recently talked about was focusing in on the site frontage greenery, the overall feel of the campus with weighted metrics, as well as student usage. So Carnegie is going back and kind of working on this piece right now. Emerging technologies. So again, this also kind of tucked its way into a couple other of the other categories, but making sure that we have high efficiency, low energy lighting fixtures, make sure that we have high efficiency smart HVAC systems, high efficiency low flow plumbing systems, and high performing building envelopes like roofs, walls, and windows. Make sure that we also have green site infrastructure and then green vehicle equipment and systems in the transition to an EV fleet. Some of the highlights when we were talking about that was really being able to be flexible. So as technology becomes available, allowing us to pilot it possibly at a school or have funds set aside to implement new technologies, knowing that it may not work perfectly, that we're going to try it because we know that it's the right thing to do, but having the ability to say, instead of doing it district-wide, we're trying it at one campus first, and then we'll roll it out if it seems to work well. Under education and awareness, having a collaborative approach, we're having district advisory groups, partners, families, staff, and school site communities, as well as curriculum opportunities, aligning with environmentally oriented resources and standards, and expanding curriculum into the natural world. having more learning opportunities, environmental literacy, healthy foods, extending into outdoor environments, waste impact and reduction, and then partnerships with partnerships to speak about specific subject matter. And then one thing for education and awareness is there's a lot of partnerships available both at the state and county level. Our county is actually very involved with education and awareness when it comes to sustainability. As a potential opportunity to move many of the items forward is to have a sustainability teacher on special assignment, or TOSA, who could spearhead and guide green initiatives at each school site with a green site lead. So this was something that came up in discussions from a couple of our teachers that were on the committee. We have a teacher that is working in another district and a couple of teachers that are within our district that talked about kind of the need for someone to be able to help the school sites with some of the things like recycling and somebody to actually spearhead it at their school.
So as we mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of different aspects, Rebecca just touched on, the learning opportunities and sort of, grassroots efforts to promote environment. So a couple of slides here just to touch on the capital projects and the view going 10 years back to the beginning of Measure G. With Measure G, you touched a lot of the high touch buildings where staff and students worked, so all the classrooms, offices were improved. And you can see that a lot of the capital aspects that we've touched on have been addressed through Measure G. That continues with Measure T, with solar shade structures that were implemented on every site, site lighting systems that were completed as part of Measure T. And then ongoing projects right now with Measure T include the HVAC replacement, the window replacement, and then some park restrooms, plumbing fixtures, et cetera, and then drink bottle fill stations, the reduction of plastics and waste. And then some other projects that are currently being considered, that are being studied, that you're very much aware of, roof repair, roof replacement. That was something that had been identified in an earlier bond measure, but really has been pushed back, and really, part of that having an efficient building in that efficient envelope. We've touched a lot about with Carducci and the outdoor landscapes and learning, and then having stormwater features then integrated into design of the outdoor spaces on campuses. So that's something that's kind of in front of the district right now at the moment. Some utility surveys and et cetera. So you can see in terms of the equitable distribution of just resources and energy, how it's been applied at the 11 schools in the district. There's a bunch of ideas that have been brought to the surface through the committee, but also from yourselves, that are more district-wide initiatives. Lighting controls, the EV fleet transition that the MV5 is currently helping you folks with, child nutrition initiatives, sustainable practices. One thing that's been talked about quite a bit in the council is tying food to their impacts to the environment and the production of food. And also, I think Living Classrooms has been doing a lot with regards to helping educate kids about alternatives to food, but by getting them involved in the growing, the preparation, the processing. And when you make that connection for kids, that's where the real learning, starts to occur. School site committees, very much, Justin, I think Gordon at Vargas has been very passionate, very active member of our committee. Really focus on behavioral change to reduce energy usage, reduce, waste streams by self-sorting, and then from his past experience, really developing these sort of green teams at each school site, so that it's not dependent, it's more institutionalized and not dependent on specific individuals, for that effort. We've talked a lot about native landscapes, and there's a lot of, that's going on in that. So that's kind of a view back, over the last 10 years. And I think one of the things that we've kind of thought through this is that actually the district has already been doing a lot. And it's just really continuing and taking an opportunistic approach either capital projects or purchasing decisions, or, you get into a fork in the road, do we buy this or do we buy that? Or, you get into different school years and how's our curriculum going to evolve? So the incremental approach is just continuous process improvement, over a sustained period of time, and having that be at programmatic level and institutionalized, so that as people change, as leadership change, that continues and is not totally dependent on a particularly passionate individual. So I think that's what's happening, and so in terms of the future, you can kind of see where that's going. So I'll turn over to Rebecca to close us out.
So as we're going through all of these meetings, it's really exciting to hear all the different ideas that are out there. And then my mind goes to, okay, how much is this going to cost? And then what is our run rate for implementation? And I think that's when sometimes it can become overwhelming. So I think part of our next steps is to compile a list of ideas that were brought through the committee, things that came from the board, and assign a cost to the items or propose future studies for things that we're still unsure of. So for example, to give you an idea of what that might mean is, there's an idea we should go to all metal cutlery. I think when we were in school, they still had the trays with the knives and forks that were washed. That's much more sustainable. But when we think about how do you implement that district-wide, the project is larger than it seems because we need to install large dishwashers. The cutlery needs to be washed between breakfast and lunch. And then we need to buy trash cans to filter out the cutlery. When I was speaking with Debbie Austin, she said, Jen, you're going to lose about one set of cutlery per school a year because the kids are going to toss them and you're not going to be able to fish them out. And then we need more man hours because we need somebody to come in early and stay later to finish the dishwashing. So something like that seems like a simple switch actually would take us a little bit more time to understand how many more man hours, what's the total cost going to be ongoing and then upfront. So we'll bring to you a list of items that the committee has talked about with hopefully general price tags, as well as future studies that were needed for things that we're just not quite sure on. Then we'll present a draft plan to the board on May 2nd, along with looking at the bond projects, because we are now finishing priority 1 items, but some of the priority 2 items that the board will need to look at because they probably are now becoming priority 1 items. So you can see the costs of facilities as well as sustainability facility pieces, what the cost is for each and where you want the district to move forward next. So we'll bring the draft plan to you on May 2nd, and then we'll be asking the board to give direction on where you would like to take the district. And I guess maybe something that, is this the correct direction? Is this what you're thinking on what you would like for the sustainability plan?
All right, thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation. And trustees, are there questions? Trustee Berman.
I was just curious about there was mention of curriculum opportunities, and I wonder if you could say a little bit more about this. When I think of curriculum, I think of math and reading. So I'm wondering if this is something in line with what something a teacher would teach in their classroom, or is it something different?
We've talked about kind of the whole range of things. We've talked about after school programming. We've talked about in the classroom. I think we have a very passionate group of individuals. Some of the items are actually already taught through NGSS in our science classrooms. So there's a lot of things that are already happening, but it's also about how can we highlight it and bring it together, and then possibly also bring in partners who have expertise in particular areas.
Sure. I can answer that. So Swati presented to us as well as Vicky. And so one thing that they talked about is that there was a huge paradigm shift, I guess about 10, 15 years ago, where NGSS updated their math, science, and technology curriculum to be more environmental and nature-based. And so I think that part of the curriculum and the paradigm has shifted, but the physical plan hasn't. So I think part of the work that you're doing now with Carducci is to create outdoor landscapes and outdoor classrooms that can better facilitate that paradigm shift. So that's kind of an example of sort of a continuous evolution.
Trustee Blakely.
I have 2 questions. One's tiny. You talked about one idea would be to get a TOSA, teacher on special assignment, to help oversee some of these initiatives. Would that just be one for the whole district, or would it be one per school? I wasn't clear.
Yeah, this is one of the ideas that was talked about in the committee. So we have a technology TOSA right now that is one for the district, and then they have leads at each school site.
Okay.
So I think Justin had suggested that as a potential that might work.
Okay.
If I can answer that. So Justin, we talked a lot about that. And he said that one of the key aspects of the TOSA is because that's the individual that really is fostering behavioral change and a change in the mindset and accountability among staff and students. One of the things that we also talked a lot about is the more that you can systematize, good practices and not make it reliant on behavior, the better your execution is going to be.
Thank you. And my other question was, we heard a student this evening, I think she said she was a Landell's third grader, advocating for more plant-based offerings by the cafeteria. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to include student voice in some of these initiatives. I know you talked about school site committees. Would it be possible to include students? I just think there's so much buy-in and our students have some great ideas.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Lambert.
So you talked about your gathering lots of information, a lot of ideas. You talked about the interest in sort of providing a framework for the district in long term. What do you envision the work product? I'm not talking about the implementation, but the work product of your planning to be.
That's something we're still wrestling with. Like, you mean what the plan will actually look like, that piece?
In May.
I wouldn't even go so far as the implementation. I think that's something else, right? Basically, the framework. That's what I understood you to talk about. Call it best practices.
I think
in other words, you've been gathering a whole lot of information, a lot of ideas. How do we know about it? How does the next board know about it? How does when we think about when a contractor comes in to do something, we give them here's the book, right? This is.
So I think our what we're thinking right now is that it will be something similar to the master facility plan that we can hold on to and say, this is what we're going towards. There's more projects here than we can ever accomplish, but here's how we would like to prioritize them. In the committee actually had really great suggestions because some of these items, they're so expensive. I don't know if we'll be able to accomplish them, but they said some ideas for a discussion for the board when you're prioritizing is maybe student health and safety. How close are these changes to the student? There's lots of things we would like to do that we know are good for the environment, but how does it actually impact the student when they're at school? A small item, an example that they gave was switching from, we have a couple of water heaters that are still gas. Most of them have switched over to electric. For the student, they may not feel that change as impactful as another change. Yes, there's be a change to some air quality, but the perception of the change for the student will be much lower.
Yeah, that's it. I think we use the term framework because there's going to be a lot of breadth, but the detail will vary, the level of detail will vary substantially. And it'll vary substantially depending on where the board and the district are in the process. So like take, for example, campus ecology. You have an ongoing Carducci study that has been probably 12 months. So you're going to have a fairly detailed level of inquiry and rigor and information related to that one focus area. Other areas where maybe you haven't arrived at the decision point, let's say like EV fleet transition. NV5 is still ongoing. There's really nothing actionable right now that we can bring to the table. But I think one of the things that the framework would do is it would keep visible the items that can be considered, so that as any one area comes to prominence, you don't so redirect your energy and your focus to that one area and sub-optimize all the other areas and lose sight of the other areas. So, I think one thing that we've discussed is the need to constantly kind of maintain your peripheral vision on all the opportunities that might be out there, so that as the district approaches a key decision, whether it be acquisition, projects, funding, scoping of what gets included in the next bond measure, et cetera, or, a curriculum decision, that there's this, we call it, hey, we have a larger framework. Let's see how this one decision aligns with that so that we can formulate the different analysis of alternatives that needs to occur at that point in time. So it's almost like a more it's like a scoping document in that sense.
Oh, lots more comments later. Thanks.
And my understanding is, looking back at the resolution that we passed, we said that we would adopt a broad environmental sustainability plan. So I know it's being referred to as a framework, but I think this is actually the environmental sustainability plan that we committed to crafting and adopting. Is that correct?
Yes, I think something that has come through some of our discussions is when we initially started, I was envisioning a plan to say the next school we build is going to have permeable surfaces, we'll have solar, like I was thinking of creating a checklist for ourselves. But as we discussed it with the committee, because the technology is changing so quickly, it may not benefit us to have like a defined plan, but say we will we'll say these are the types of things that we're interested in with a new school, unless the board would like to direct us to create like a specified.
Well, I think an environmental sustainability plan can actually include a framework, right?
Got it.
But I think that some of the things that I'm curious about, are we looking at any type of, when I think about having this be continued, when this board is different, when there's a different superintendent, different staff, are we including any metrics or goals or thresholds that need to be reached at certain school sites? Or where is kind of the accountability measure within our plan? And it might be that the framework is a piece of the plan, but there's also some metrics or goals that we set.
And I think that's an area where the board can set sort of criteria. So for instance, you can say, we have a goal of using 25% recycled materials at every single site that's being constructed, at minimum. Or you can say that, you want to see certain specific targets, that we sort of hit, or, 50% of all school grounds will be, green open spaces. I think those are perfectly fine. That could be incorporated in the plan, and then they can be adjusted over time based off of the different types of criteria. But I think that's more for us. We're trying to identify, so here are the frameworks, and then the board can set sort of the targets that they want to hit, and that can always be something that evolves.
I'd like to see recommended targets though, because the board, as wonderful as we all are, might not have the expertise to actually understand what is realistic in some of these different areas.
Yeah, I think that just thinking about your question now, and we've kind of been thinking about this question as well, is I think the different focus areas are going to have different types of targets. I think the physical ones are the most easily measurable, like the greening index, percentage of softscape as a percentage of hardscape. That's really easy. The more intangible it gets, the more I think the target is going to have to be different in nature. But we can think through what those targets could potentially be. The question is, when we start to set specific quantitative targets, are we going off of a baseline? And if we are going off of a baseline, we need to establish the baseline, and what would it cost to establish that baseline? So those are things that we've talked about. We haven't really come to any conclusion on it yet.
Something we want to make sure that we can do is actually monitor our progress. And I think in the science community, it's looking at tons of CO2, like what's your footprint? But in order for a district to calculate that, we would need to hire a consultant to come in. I mean, we could generalize it and say, we think we're about here, but our system is so large that if we wanted an actual number, we need to have someone come in. The downside to doing that is we're spending money that we could have spent on like stuff something here to have somebody come in and do the measurements. So we want to try to, I think we would like to do a goal that we can actually measure in-house, but it may not be the standard, and we don't have the best, we're still working on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just, when I look at the components of the resolution, and this is really kind of tied up with this, I think about that, you've talked about the components of the framework, which I consider part of the plan. We're talking about how do we measure success over time? How do we set goals for it? Yes, I know there's a lot to be sorted out, but I do want that to be something we're thinking about and that comes back to us. And so something else that we talked about in our resolution was the board actually adopting policy around this as well. So it might be that some of the recommendations that come in May with the sustainability plan are policy recommendations, that we adopt a policy about green materials usage or something like that. So I'd love for that to be tied in, if possible, just as we think forward. Trustee Lambert.
Sort of segueing into.
I'm sorry, I know that was a question that became a comment, but we need to take public comment. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to comment on this item, you may raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. We do not have any in-person members of the public right now. Seeing as there is none, are there further comments from trustees? Trustee Lambert.
Yeah, I just follow up with what President Conley said. I see really, I would like to see the focus on the policy, on the framework, not implementation. And the way I see this is, what I would like to see is, sort of a guidelines of how, no matter what we do in the district, what anybody does in the district, how we filter it through this sustainability lens, whatever purchasing is done, whatever construction is done. Being too specific is not productive because, as you mentioned, technologies will change, budget requirements will change. So that's why I would be generally against setting targets because, well, first of all, we don't have the expertise. I don't. I see a lot of people setting targets, but they're also very financially burdensome unnecessarily, and that will change with time. So we need to be flexible, right? And not set a target and try to achieve it just to achieve something, right? That's politicians do that, right? And they very rarely, achieve those. Anyway, I see it as a way to think about things and not to spend too much time at the moment trying to solve individual problems or make specific suggestions, because that's a huge amount of work. The other comment I have, I think what I'm, as you mentioned, this can cost a lot of money. We don't have to do everything all at once. And I want to make sure that this is important, but that we also keep our focus on the education of our kids and having the right facilities that are going to support education of our kids, support the teachers, in being able to teach, things like that. And not, I don't want the sustainability plan to sort of take away from really my primary goal of education. But I think it can be done all at once. It just takes time. Thank you.
Trustee Berman.
I would agree with Trustee Lambert's comments. And I also, when I think about the framework, I know that there's all these great ideas that have been generated, and I appreciate all of them. I also wonder if there's, I don't know if this lives in the framework, but when I hear the ideas, I think about priorities and making a recommendation for how we prioritize, and maybe for those things that we've prioritized sort of in that first quadrant or the top quartile, it's sort of a justification of why, like why are we prioritizing those things? And I also wonder if there's a way to sort of connect it to, how close will the impact be to the students, right? If we're thinking, we're putting students first and what our students need, if there's an element to that too, which just I thought of as Trustee Lambert was sharing about how we want to make sure we're also focusing on educating our students and making sure that our focus for teachers is on what's best for students. So I love the idea of the school committees serving as sort of the public information officers for each school site and really fostering the change that needs to happen in our practices at the student level. I think that's a terrific idea. And I'm so thankful for the work that the committee is doing. It's really, and I'm appreciative of everyone who's volunteering they're not just their time, but their expertise and their passion. I think we're involving our community in a very unique way and in a way that's going to benefit all of our students and all of our schools. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Trustee Blakely.
I was just going to say my colleagues are much more eloquent than I, but I agree with them and I appreciate your effort.
And, I think, I don't think, I guess I'm not worried about our sustainability practices somehow edging out our student needs or student learning, because I see them as deeply interwoven. The county, Santa Clara County, has an environmental literacy initiative that is very youth focused. It hits more for middle school and high school students than for lower elementary students. But when we look at like the mental health of children in our community, we know that there's actually a lot of mental health overlap with concern about the climate crisis, that it's terrifying for children and they feel powerless and they see these awful things happen. They experience the weather changes, they read about stuff in the news. And that sense of helplessness or despair for their own future is very, very negative. And so the more that we can tie these things into educational opportunities within the classroom and student agency, the better, because it gives our children some agency and ownership and hope over what's happening. I have a fifth grader who is a member of the green team at his school. And, it's interesting the way that's really played out is that it's high value to be on the green team sorting the extra snacks that are being shared on chocolate chip muffin day. But he also, has been making sure we are sorting our compost and recycling effectively at home in a way that he didn't before, right? So I think the more that we can build an ownership for our students, the better. And it's going to have a long-term impact. I'm really looking forward to what comes back to us in May. I think this is ongoing work. It's not going to be solved easily. I do, there's a group called, I'm going to forget the name of it. Kaylee is doing a environmental literacy workshop for school districts that I've been attending or watching the videos afterwards when I can't make the actual workshops. And there's a group called Undaunted K-12, that's what I was trying to remember, who has recommendations for school boards about how to approach climate proofing schools and also environmental literacy. And so there's just so much work going on right now in this that I'm excited for us to also be a leader in this space and be part of this movement to really improve the sustainability practices of our districts and how we're engaging our students in it. So thank you very much for all of your work. And thank you to the committee members because they have devoted a great deal of time and effort and thought to something that's really meaningful. And I hope that they get to see implementation around it. All right, on that note, we will move on to our next item. Where on review and action, these items are relatively quick. Item 7A is the 2024 CSBA Delegate Assembly election. Dr. Rudolph, I'm also happy to speak about this a little bit.
Yeah, so the Santa Clara County Region 20 has 5 vacancies, and it turns out that there are 5.
No, we have 4 vacancies,
There are 4
and we have 5 candidates.
Oh, okay. So, sorry.
So I'm happy to speak to this.
I'll let you take it over then, because it just got a little bit thicker there. So I thought this was pretty straightforward.
Nope,
Five-
not
five-
at
five,
all.
okay.
It's actually not easy. So I'm, and for context for the public, I'm the regional director for CSBA for Santa Clara County. So these are the delegates that elect me and that I work quite closely with at CSBA. There are 4 delegate positions that are up for election this year. There are 5 candidates. I'm happy to kind of discuss some of the candidates or hear from people about who, they are considering based on their own knowledge and experience.
I'd be grateful to have you lead a discussion, President Conley.
Okay, let me pull up the list.
I feel like I know them all a few better than others, but don't really, it's hard.
Yeah, well, so, what was interesting was we had only 2 of the incumbents run. So Lorena Chavez, who was one of the incumbents, chose not to run again, as did, I believe, Mary Patterson chose not to run again. So there are the 2 incumbents who are running are Jody Muirhead, who is with the Santa Clara Unified School District, and Jessica Spicer is an incumbent. She's the current president of the Santa Clara County School Boards Association. So they are both current delegates, and they are running for this. Carol Prasunka from Cambrian School District, that's a small school district. We don't have a lot of representation from smaller school districts. It's up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. She was previously a delegate, but she was an appointee. And when she ran the last time, she was an appointee for a year. And then when she ran for the slot, she did not get reelected. But I also think it's a little bit hard coming from a small school district. You don't know as many people. She is also currently the vice president of the Santa Clara County School Boards Association and will be the president in the coming year. So that turnover is coming soon. These are all excellent candidates. Isabel is in Sunnyvale. She hosted the Hoffman Awards. She's chairing that for Santa Clara County School Boards Association for the 2nd year in a row. So she's also really involved. And then Shali, we all know really well, and she's on the Juvenile Justice Commission for the county. She's on her professional work is with the cities, I think it's the Cities Coalition. And I think the main challenge here is that both Shali and Jessica are from the same school district. And so, I leaned myself towards Jody has a lot of institutional knowledge as an incumbent, and she's been doing this since 2000. Well, she was first elected to her board in 2014. So I'd hate to lose her. And then beyond that, I really think our board can decide where they want to go.
I'll help you out a little bit with this.
Okay.
I would prefer not, I think it's the right thing to do to not have 2 representatives from the same school district.
From the same district.
So I would choose one of those candidates and then
Okay.
and the 3 others from district. And I don't know these people, so I can't just.
Do other trustees feel similarly?
Kind of, but I really think Shelley would be wonderful, but I don't really know some of the others as well. So I wish there were 5 slots.
Yeah, so do I. And I feel similarly. I think that would make sense to have not have 2 representatives from the same school district. However, I think Shelley has a lot to bring to the group.
I will note in their terms on their own school board, Shali was reelected in 2022, and Jessica is up for reelection in 2024. But I don't know that she's running for the Los Altos School Board again. I'm not sure of that. Some of you may know.
I believe she is planning to run for the county board. And so if she's up, you can't run for two things at the same time.
Right.
So she would not, she's either coming off if she does not get elected to the county board, or she would be on the county board.
And they are on the delegate assembly for how long? How long is the term?
2 years. And it starts, the first meeting they would attend is in May. The second meeting is in December. For each year, there's a May and a December and a May and a December. The County Board of Ed does appoint a representative. They appoint a delegate. And so we currently have a delegate from the County Board of Ed, but that can, they do that on their own. They're kind of independent. They're not voted in by us as school boards. Trustee Lambert.
Make a motion?
Yes.
I move that we, is the word elect,
Yeah, we elect.
electing, Isabel Hubes Lamerick, Jody Muirhead, Carol Przunka, and Ashali Surke to the Board of Trustees, to the CSBA Delegate Assembly.
Is there a second?
I think another option for us to consider, if we had the two representatives from Los Altos, if Jessica Spicer were to not be on the school board next in 2024, right? And we would still have one representative from the school board. Then it would open up the position for an appointee. Is that correct?
So here's what happens when there's an appointee. Yes. If, let's say there was a candidate who was elected as a delegate, and in November, they were elected to a different office. The swearing in of new school board members usually comes after the second delegate assembly meeting. So for example, when Rosemary Kamei was elected to city council, she still served as a delegate that December for the county Board of Ed because she had not been replaced on the county. There had not been the swearing in of the new trustees yet. So that candidate would serve for the whole first year. And then if they moved on to another location, there would be an appointment process. In the past, I am the person who makes the appointment recommendation to the president of CSBA, but usually with the guidance and the vote of the delegates. We've strongly weighted prior candidates. So who ran last year and didn't get on, because it's a big time commitment, frankly, to take 2 whole weekends and get to Sacramento or wherever you need to be. So in theory, there's no promises, right? But in theory, out of the 5 candidates, if one is not elected and a position becomes vacant, then somebody could be appointed. But my term as regional director is also up in December. So I won't be I would have to be reelected in that office to then be the person who, helps advise the nomination process for an appointee. So there's no guarantees, but that's kind of been the practice. So you could offer a friendly amendment. We have to deal with the motion that, well, if there's no second for it, I guess we don't vote for it. Is there another motion?
I'm struggling. Would you like to make a motion, President Conley?
That is very hard because I've worked so closely with the delegates. Usually there is a kind of informal goal to make sure that the SCC SBA president is a delegate because they are so well informed about what's going on in the region and really great advocates. And so if the board chose to elect Jessica Spicer, and then she ends up not being a trustee after December, it is highly likely that Shali would be appointed in her place, but not guaranteed.
Make the motion, I'm sorry. So you're suggesting that perhaps can't do this.
Well, there's from my attendance in the meetings, I think the trustees that I've heard from the most in my experience, I've heard from all of them. But I guess I was thinking that my motion would be towards selecting Jody Muirhead, Carol Bazunka, Vishali Sirke, and Jessica Spicer, knowing that I know that that would be two from the same district.
Well, so my only concern is that we do not have a so in our county, we have a significant Latino population. Amongst our delegates,
yes,
we only have a very limited Latino representation. And so I would recommend Isabel because she is one of the only Latinas that would be a delegate, especially because we've lost Lorena. And Teresa Castellanos, who is the representative from San Jose Unified School District, their enrollment dropped below 30,000. So she will lose her appointment next year, and we will be down yet another person with that background.
Yeah, that is not.
And then also to further complicate matters, Shali is the current treasurer of the SCC SBA, but next year will be the vice president.
I know.
And that change isn't next year, that changes in like May. So as of May, Shali will be vice president, Carol will be president, Jessica will be the past president. I'm going to make a motion and put everyone out of their misery, even though it's just heartbreaking to do it. But I think I'm kind of future oriented, and I want to make sure that Shali gets the experience in the office. And I know that Jessica is going. I have high hopes for Jessica, and I think she'll come back to us as a delegate in another format. So I would actually suggest that we vote for.
Second Bill's motion.
I'm going to make, yeah, I am. I'm going to second, well, I forgot what I'm going to second Bill's motion. Thank you, Bill.
Can you restate your motion so it's clear?
Okay, my motion was to elect for CSBA Delegate Assembly, Isabel Hubes Flamerich, Jody Muirhead, Carol Przunka, and Vashili Sirke.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Lambert and seconded by Trustee Conley, the board has unanimously voted to elect the first 4 candidates on this list to Delegate Assembly. I know this one's very, very hard. Our next item is resolution number 01-022924 in support of recognizing Women's History Month. I think we're going to hear from Director Pullman.
Thank you so much. Yes, good evening. Tomorrow, March 1st, marks the beginning of Women's History Month, and MVWSD presents this resolution tonight in hopes that you will recognize the significance and historical contributions women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made in our community. So we honor them with this in this month, but also in every month. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from trustees? If you're a member of the public, oh, I did not ask for public comment on if you're a member of the public and you would like to comment on this item, you may do so by raising your hand in Zoom. I'm not sure if we went out for public comment for the CSBA Delegate Assembly. So if you had public comment on that, please raise your hand as well. It looks like it's only staff on the line. Trustees, is there a motion? We can do a choral reading or we can waive the choral reading. It's up to you all.
I move that we approve the resolution as presented.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then trustees, would you prefer to do a reading or waive the reading for now? Okay. All right. Thank you, trustees. On a motion made by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Berman, resolution number 01-022924 in support of recognizing Women's History Month passes unanimously. We will now move on to resolution number 02-022924, reduction of classified services with our Chief Human Relations Officer, Tara Vicjord.
Good evening. So each year at this time, we must come to you and notify any impacted staff of any layoff of a classified position at the end of the school year. And so tonight we come to you with the 3 positions listed here that were posted as temporary positions. So staff have known from the beginning and have been notified that these positions will not continue to be funded in the upcoming year. And so I bring to you a resolution tonight and ask you to approve the resolution as presented.
Thank you. Are there any questions from trustees? Is there any public comment on Zoom? Seeing none, is there a motion from trustees? Trustee Lambert?
I move that the board adopt resolution number 02-022924, reduction of classified services as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
On a motion made by trustee Lambert and seconded by trustee Berman, resolution number 02-202924, reduction of classified services passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Vicjord, for staying up for that. We'll move on to item 8, opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. If you would like to comment on the 3 items on the closed session agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. You can raise your hand in Zoom, press star 9 on your phone, and there is no one here in person. Seeing as there are no members of the public on Zoom, we will now adjourn at 9:14 p.m. to close session. at 9:32 p.m. We will reconvene after closed session. On item A1 on the closed session agenda, the board did not take any action on this item. On item A2 on the closed session agenda, the board unanimously voted to approve a compromise agreement resolving educationally related claims, including as special education claims asserted by parents of a student against the district that does not exceed $14,518. On item 2, there was no action taken. We will now move on to board updates. Are there any updates from trustees? I'll just point out again quickly on March 7th, our school district is hosting a tour of our teacher housing site for members of the Santa Clara County School Boards Association, as we've also invited our county supervisor, Supervisor Smidian, our state senator, Senator Becker, Mark Berman, our assembly member. And that is at 4 p.m. The registration cutoff is March 1st. Feel free to share with your colleagues. We have at least 15 people RSVP'd so far, including one district is bringing their superintendent and their CBO as well. Trustee Lambert.
Do you encourage us to attend?
If you're interested and you haven't been through the site,
I've been
absolutely.
to the site, so, but
If you've been through this, I mean, it might not be anything new for you, but if you would like to, be there to confer with trustees who are learning about it and want to know about our process, that's also helpful.
wanted to make sure, I'm looking at Dr. Rudolph. I just want to make sure, I want to represent the district well, and
Yep, I mean, probably the PG&E, we have an issue with PG&E, so the elevator's not operating yet because they haven't tied into electricity. So, and outside of that, the only thing you would see is probably another floor that's been fully completed, but it's no different than what we've seen
you're
before.
comfortable of.
Yes. Mhm.
I'll be there as well.
Yeah, and Trustee Berman and I will be in Southern
We'll
California.
be in California, in San Diego. Okay. And then on March 9th is the legislative brunch. I hope you all have registered. Oh, it's from 9 to 12. You could come for part or all of it. It's on March 9th, Saturday. It's at the Fremont Union High School District office. So it's just down the road in Sunnyvale. It's not far. Yes,
Did
sir.
you receive an invitation to that?
Probably
Maybe I did.
multiple times.
You did, but if you want,
Please send it to me, just.
yeah, we can have.
Nancy can
yes,
register
okay.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, she can register you. The tickets are $35 and they basically cover the cost
On
of,
a Saturday, so.
it's brunch. But you also could come for part of it and not stay for the whole thing if that is an issue. And I've gone over in the past who we have lined up. Linda Darling Hammond is always fantastic to hear from. She's going to be in conversation with our moderator, John Fensterwald from EdSource, previously the San Jose Mercury News.
I do believe Nancy sent it to me.
Oh, okay.
And I have a red flag on it, but
You just need it.
it's among many other red
No,
flags.
it's okay. There's, if I were to count the number of SCC SBA emails that I get, and then we have lined up County Supervisors Ellenberg and Otto and Lee, and then we have our Senators Cortese, Wahab, and Laird, who is also the chair of the Education Subcommittee for the Budget Committee in the Senate. And then our Assembly members, Lee, Kalra, Pellerin, and Berman are coming. And then we'll have a representative from Congressman Ro Khanna's office. There will be a representative from Zoe Lofgren's office as well, probably, but they're not, really doing panel discussions, but they'll be there as well. If there are no further board updates, and there's no community comment on that item, there's no members of the public on Zoom or in person, we'll move on to future board meeting dates. We have our upcoming March 14th is our reclassification and EL program update. April 18th will be a boundaries discussion. May 2nd, it will be reviewing the environmental sustainability plan. And May 16th, we'll be looking at our 2024 LCAP survey results. We also have a link now on our agendas to our 2023-24 governance calendar, which I encourage the public to look at. It kind of lays out the planning for the year on some of our big items that are required at certain times, but also things that we want to make sure to review.
Can I just ask a quick question, which I probably should have done in board updates, but have we ever considered, I mean, now that we're out of COVID, like, you know, the before times and the after times, have we ever considered having some kind of a little reception or something briefly, you know, before a meeting to thank our PTA councils and our site councils, our PTA officers? I was just thinking, like, people used to come to our meetings, and the active people, you know, in the district, we used to see regularly at meetings, and we never, well, those of us who don't have kids in school don't have as regular of an opportunity to interact with the shakers and the movers and the doers in our district. And I was just thinking, I don't know, we don't have that many meetings before the end of the year, but it might be nice to have a little, like, you know, just cookies and thank you and a little resolution or something like that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a bad idea. I know that PTA Council does kind of, they give out awards at the end of the year and have something sort of like that. And that is the board presidents from our district, Los Altos, and the high school district. But I think we can certainly go look at what we could possibly do to appreciate our, I would say not just our PTAs, but our school site councils, our ALACs, our DAC, like maybe like a volunteer appreciation kind of moment of some sort would be a lovely thing to do.
I definitely would want to expand
We
it.
can look at a meeting in May or even include it with the end of year teacher celebration too. So, because it'll be the day before the last day of school. We'll look at it and come back.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, at 9:40 p.m., this meeting of the Mountain View Wisdom School Board is adjourned.